ಪ್ರಸಾದ್ ಸರ್, ಹಿರಿಯ ಬೋಧಕರು ಅಬ್ದುಲ್ ನಜೀರ್ ಸಾಬ್, ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಜಿಎಸ್ ಗಣೇಶ್ ಪ್ರಸಾದ್, ಹಿರಿಯ ಬೋಧಕರು ಅಬ್ದುಲ್ ನಜೀರ್ ಸಾಬ್, ರಾಜ್ಯ ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಮತ್ತು ಪಂಚಾಯತ್ ರಾಜ್ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಮೈಸೂರು. ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಎಸ್.ಆರ್. ವಾಸವಿ, ಪ್ರಖ್ಯಾತ ಸಮಾಜ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಗಳು ಹಾಗೂ ಟ್ರಸ್ಟಿ, ಪುನರ್ಚಿತ್, ಚಾಮರಾಜನಗರ. ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷತೆ ವಹಿಸಿರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಎಂ ಉಮಾಪತಿ, ವಿಶ್ರಾಂತ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರು, ರಾಜ್ಯಶಾಸ್ತ್ರ ವಿಭಾಗ, ಮೈಸೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾನಿಲಯ. ಇವರು ದಯಮಾಡಿ ವೇದಿಕೆಯನ್ನು ಅಲಂಕರಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಕೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಎರಡನೇ ದಿನದ 4ನೇ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಗೆ ಸರ್ವರಿಗೂ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷತೆಯನ್ನು ವಹಿಸಿರುವ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಎಂ ಉಮಾಪತಿಯವರು ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯನ್ನು ಮುನ್ನಡೆಸಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಕೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೇನೆ.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. These discussions since yesterday have been very vibrant and issues of financial issues were discussed yesterday much, and today issues of parliamentary representation, delimitation have been discussed. But now we have come to a stage when the decentralization in the federal system. The federal system is adequate, and whether a more decentralized federal system is necessary is the question which our experts are going to examine now. And first, Dr. G.S. Ganesh Prasad of the Rural Development Institute, Mysore, and then Dr. A.R. Vasavi, social scientists. One by one, they will present, and discussion. I look forward for a vibrant discussion on these issues too. Now, Mr. Ganesh Prasad.
Good afternoon, respected chairperson and dignitaries. In this particular presentation, I will be focusing more on Karnataka scenario, and wherever it is required, I will be giving examples of other states also. The focus of this particular paper will be on intra-state issues related to development and also the fund position with the Panchayat Raj institutions. Having said that, Karnataka is one of the states which had done lots of studies with regard to intra-state development issues. And I would like to start the presentation with one of those studies that has been conducted by the State Institute of Rural Development in association with the STM Institute for Management and Development, wherein we have examined issues related to socio-economic deprivation within the state. In fact, as many of you know, socio-economic caste census was conducted in many parts of the country starting from 2011. And in Karnataka, that was taken up and completed by 2014. This is basically a household data collection process within which about 4 major parameters have been addressed. And the total sample size within the Karnataka state it amounted to nearly 1.2 crore households, out of which the rural household number was around 80 lakhs. It was a voluminous data that we had to challenge. We had the challenge of dealing with such voluminous data. And finally, when we started cleaning the data, about 1 lakh households had to be kept away because that could not be accommodated because the data was incomplete. Basically, it looks at issues related to the multidimensional poverty. And after analyzing the data, we thought that we will come out with socio-economic deprivation index. Initially, we have computed that one at the district level. We can go up to the block level and also the Gram Panchayat level. Currently, we have also started looking into about 22 lakh households in urban areas for which the data analysis is now going on. Next slide. Basically, as I said earlier, it amounted to about looking at about 80 lakh household data. These are the dimensions of deprivation that is being looked into. One is housing, the income and employment scenario, assets, and land. These are the 4 parameters. Totally, all of them accounted for nearly 16 major indicators. That was suggested by the Ministry of Rural Development. And the most important issue that we were looking at was regional disparity in deprivation, and also looking at deprivation in terms of gender, caste, religion, education facilities, differently abled, even within the marital status, what type of deprivation takes place. These were some of the issues that had been looked into this one. Next slide, please. This is the regional wise distribution of households, which was the final sample. Bangalore with about 23 lakh, Mysore about 20 lakh households, Kalburgi about 14 lakh households, and Belagavi with about 20 lakh households. Totally nearly 78 lakh households was the sample or the universe. Finally, when we computed the socio-economic deprivation index, at the state level, the deprivation was to the extent of 0.53. As we move towards 0, the deprivation will be on the lower side. As we move towards 1, the deprivation will be on the higher side. And within that one, the asset deprivation was highest, followed by land deprivation, income and employment deprivation, and lastly, the housing deprivation. In the sense that housing sector had made significant inroads in providing houses to the individual households. And there was lack of uniformity in deprivation across all the components. That is something which will be shown in the next slide. If we look at division-wise, region-wise breakup within Karnataka, in fact, many of us academicians and researchers will be surprised. Kalburgi division happened to be the least deprived, mainly because of the fact that housing and other facilities, the performance was better compared to the southern parts of the country, state. And Bangalore region was the most deprived, mainly because of the land issues. So that was the major reason. When we start looking at the asymmetry in this particular issue, when it comes to the poor performing state districts, Chamarajanagar, Haveri, Dharwad, Mysore, and Ramnagara, these were the districts that were showing very high degree of deprivation, with Chamarajanagar being the highly deprived this one. And bottom ranking districts, if you say, where the deprivation was on the lower side, it was Dakshina Kannada at the top level, and then followed by Bidar, Bijapur, Udupi, and Ballari. This is something which goes against our own notion that northern parts of Karnataka are highly deprived compared to the southern parts of the state. But next one. And these are the values. I don't want to go into the details. I will be sharing the presentation. Housing deprivation, as I said, the lowest was in Mysore division. Income and employment deprivation, it was highest in Belagavi. assets deprivation was highest in Kalburgi division. Land deprivation was highest in Mysore division. These are some of the regional disparities that one can look at in the deprivation status. Next. This is how, when we look at the Karnataka state, when we start looking at individual districts, this is the scenario. Greener is better, red is on the lower side, deprivation is on the higher side. This is the housing deprivation status across this state. Next. This is with regard to the income and employment deprivation. Again, you can see the coastal Karnataka and some parts of Old Mysore area and northern Karnataka districts performing better in providing income and employment opportunities. Next. When it looks to, when you look at the asset deprivation status, many of the districts across the state are still performing poorly with regard to the assets. The next one is the land deprivation. You can see many parts of northern Karnataka and some parts of Old Mysore are better placed compared to the rest of the districts in this state. So overall, this is the situation that emerges. Overall, the northern parts of Karnataka, especially Bidar, Kalburgi, Raichur, and Bijapur, followed by coastal districts, are better off, or there is lower deprivation compared to the other parts of the state. As I said earlier, next slide. Similarly, that is one set of information. Then the other set of information pertains to the human development parameters. In fact, Karnataka was one of the earliest states which took up the preparation of district human development reports, wherein not only the district human development, but also we started looking at gender inequality index, the child development index, the food security index, and the composite taluk and district development index. That was the scenario. At a later stage, even Tamil Nadu, through the State Planning Commission, they also took up this exercise of coming out with the district level scenario. When you start looking at the district human development scenario, on the left side is the district-wise position. On the right side, it is the block-wise division, block-wise report. When we look at the two, what we can infer is that within the district, there are, even in a poorly developed district with regard to human development, there are better performing taluks. And even in relatively developed districts, there are poor performing taluks. This is the scenario that comes across all the next slides. This is the gender inequality. Closer to green is always better. Away from green, it starts showing the poor performance. Child development index. This is the scenario. We have looked at the dropout ratio, the malnourishment issues, and also health of the child. You can see many parts, when you look at the taluka-wise situation, the performance is better across many of the taluks, even in the most backward districts. This is the food security index across the districts and the taluks. Next. This is the composite taluk and district development index that I was mentioning. Here again, you can see that even in coastal areas, even in the relatively developed districts, there are certain blocks which are performing poorly. That is the scenario that emerges across this one. Now, having said that, Karnataka was one of the earliest states to take up the issue of preparing the Human Development Index also. And in fact, in SIRD, we took up that initiative of coming out with Human Development Index at the Gram Panchayat level. And when we started collecting the data from the planning department, we were fortunate to get data of villages. Village-wise data was also provided. So on the basis of that one, Karnataka prepared the first human development report in 2015 at the Gram Panchayat level and also at the village level, catering to about 5,898 Gram Panchayats and nearly 27,075 villages. It is only the Human Development Index that was computed at that particular level. And we moved further. And recently, just last month, we prepared the Human Development Index for the Gram Panchayats for Chamarajanagar district. This is based on the latest data, 21-22 data. This is the position with regard to the standard of living. The green always shows better performance by the Gram Panchayats with regard to that one. As you can see, standard with regard to the standard of living index, where income and also employment is one of the major indicators. The opportunities are there, and the dark spots are the panchayats which are performing poorly is on the lower side. This is the next slide gives you about the health. This is again, there are patches in Chamarajanagar districts where the health performance is very poor compared to the rest of the taluk district. And this is the education scenario. Again, there are any number of gram panchayats where the education related performance is on the lower side. Next. This is the overall human development index where nearly 30 to 32 gram panchayats out of 129 gram panchayats were performing badly with regard to the human development parameters. Next. Why we are raising this issue is that whenever we speak of development related issues, of course, yes, when we look at the state scenario, that gives an entirely different picture. When we start looking at the intra-state scenario, whether it is at the district level or at the taluka level or at the gram panchayat level for that matter, the asymmetry in development is something which can be measured and which can be considered more seriously at the grassroots level, especially by the Panchayat Raj institutions. Whenever I speak about these issues, I would like to mention that the Panchayat Raj institutions, especially at the district level, the intermediate level, and the Gram Panchayat level, they have adequate powers to monitor all these parameters, whether it is with respect to the standard of living, the health or education parameters. They have the adequate this one. What emerges from the above discussions is that there are regional disparities in development across the districts, across the taluks, and also across the gram panchayats in various districts. If we start discussing about poor performing districts, taluks, and gram panchayats, if we want to move away from the redistribution policies to the rewarding scenario, there may be some problems which will be difficult to address from the development perspective. So maybe we may have to devise suitable measures to address these issues at the lowest level. Next one, similarly, I will be looking into the devolution, which is being discussed since yesterday. One issue is related to, again, I will be quoting from the Karnataka experience. Just now I was having a discussion with the chairperson. In Karnataka, the total devolution from the state to the Panchayat Raj institutions has come down drastically during the last 3 decades. In fact, we have been celebrating the 3 decades of decentralization this year. And what we have seen is that there has been a considerable decrease in the funds that are earmarked to the Panchayat Raj institutions in the state. We have 2 sectors when it comes to the devolution of funds in the state. We have the district sector and we have the state sector. At one point of time, the district sector allocation was almost 35% of the total devolution from the state to the Panchayat Raj institutions. In the 23-24 budget, the district sector allocation has come down to only 17%, whereas the state sector spending has increased to 83%. Why I am mentioning is this: if the district sector allocation is more, the Panchayat Raj institutions will have a better say in implementing the development programs. What happens to the state sector is that the state sector schemes are implemented by the respective line department officials without any approval from the Panchayat Raj institutions or the urban local body. If it is a district sector program, it has to be mandatorily approved by either the Jilla Panchayat or the intermediate Panchayat, that is the Taluk Panchayat in the state, or the Gram Panchayats. As we keep on increasing the state sector, the role of Panchayat Raj institutions also start diminishing. That is the point that I wanted to convey previously. So, this being the scenario, we have been arguing for better allocation to the districts. Then let us take some of the issues related to the panchayat finances. This is especially the Gram Panchayat. This is happening across the country. When it comes to the resource envelope, in Karnataka, we have the 15th Finance Commission grants, funds under MGNRGS, that is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, the own source revenue, the statutory grants, that is the State Finance Commission grants, salary of GP staff is directly released to the Gram Panchayats, maintenance grants for drinking water schemes, and also SBM. And I have also mentioned other line departments. Just now I was mentioning about the district sector and the state sector allocation. I will just quote from one district. In Gadag district, we estimated the total amount that is being spent by the Gram Panchayats under both district sector and the state sector. On an average, the Gram Panchayat budget, including all the sources mentioned in the first bullet point, it was around 1.5 crores. That is statutory grant, the 15th Finance Commission grants, the MGNREGS grants, and other things, including the own source revenue. The spending by other line departments in the same Gram Panchayat limit, it was almost 8 crores. Totally, each Gram Panchayat spends about nearly 9 crores, for which the Gram Panchayat is accountable only for about 1.5 crores that it is implementing. So no planning happens at that level. Interestingly, under many of these schemes, we keep on saying that the beneficiaries identification should take place only in the Gram Sabha. What happens here? In this particular scenario, in the Gram Panchayat, as far as the Gram Panchayat resource envelope was concerned, under the district sector, they had identified only about 550 beneficiaries. All the other line departments put together, there were in one particular panchayat where the former principal secretary Baligar also comes from that particular panchayat. The total number of beneficiaries who were provided facilities, individual benefits under the central government and state government schemes, it was 14,500 beneficiaries had been selected, of which Gram Panchayat selects only 550. So this is the scenario. And when it comes to the MGNREGS funds, it is only a notional fund that is allocated, in the sense that Panchayat does not get any funds directly. There is only one single account in Bangalore which operates all the MGNREGS funds across the state. The Panchayat gets the allocation based on the labor budget and also the material component, which is in the 60-40 ratio. And they will implement the works. They will just submit the bills, and the payment is done by Bangalore branch directly to the beneficiaries and the suppliers. This is the scenario. But proper planning happens at that particular level. When it comes to the statutory grants, please go to the next. The allocation is much more widespread, in the sense, for a population of 7,000 in a Gram Panchayat, they will get an allocation of 10 lakhs. Over and above that, any increase in 1,000 population, they will get additional 1 lakh. When it comes to the intermediate Panchayat, they get a grant of 1 crore as development grant. And when it comes to the Jilla Panchayat, they get 4 crores. Compared to this, even this devolution, the State Finance Commission devolution, was based on the proportion that was suggested by the Union Finance Commission, that is 90% weightage for population and 10% weightage for total geographical area. So when we start looking at these trends, the other question that arises is that, are the Panchayat Raj institutions capable of handling the scenario? Often the discourse continues like this: all the decentralization has led to decentralized corruption. The local government institutions have become more corrupt. That is the scenario. But I can give any number of examples across the country and also within the state where there are excellent examples. Let me just mention 3 or 4 of that one before I conclude my presentation. One is the handling of COVID-19 situation by panchayats across the country in rural areas. If we look at the fatalities concerned with the COVID-19, the rural areas performed better compared to this one. Even in Karnataka, we had any number of panchayats which had set up checkposts at the village entry points. They started quarantine centers, the counseling through the ASHA worker and also the junior health assistant, providing employment within the villages to even the migrant population that came back to the villages during the COVID period. That is one example wherein the Gram Panchayat level task force, the village level and the Gram Panchayat level task force that was constituted with the local elected representatives that played an important role in mitigating the COVID-19 impact in rural areas. Then the libraries, rural libraries were under the Department of Library Department. During the last 2 years, it was handed over to the Gram Panchayats in this state. Now, the Gram Panchayats are having nearly 5,500 libraries, and they are spending from the Gram Panchayat's own source revenue to improve the facilities in these rural libraries. At least 1,500 of them have been converted during the last 1 year into digital libraries. And the most important thing, the elected representatives played a crucial role in enrolling nearly 40 lakh rural children in the primary school and the secondary school into the rural libraries, who are now using the benefits of the digital contents that are provided in these libraries. In fact, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that is another important point. And having said these things, are there institutional mechanisms which are capable of addressing the intrastate asymmetry within the Panchayat Raj institutions? If you look at the decentralized planning, which is provided in the institutionalization of decentralized planning mechanism that is provided under the Karnataka Gram Swaraj and Panchayat Raj Act, we start with the Janavasati Sabha, that is also known as the Habitation Sabha, followed by the Ward Sabha and the Gram Sabha, after which the Gram Panchayat level plans are prepared. Then it can be taken to the higher level, that is at the Taluka level, where the Taluk Planning and Development Committee that is headed by the local MLA, that is there, they can plan the things. And at the district level, there are district planning committees, which an effort for which is being made to make them function efficiently now. The district planning committees are headed now by the district in charge ministers of that particular district. And at the state level, we have the Karnataka State Decentralized Planning and Development Committee, which is headed by none other than the Chief Minister himself, to look into the rural planning issues. This being the institutional mechanism, within the federal structure, the local government institutions can play an important role in addressing issues related to asymmetry in development or devolution. Having said this, I will conclude here. Thank you.
But she's working at the people's level as the of ownership development organization, people development organization,
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be speaking mostly about federalism and agriculture in the context of federalism. But looking at the extent to which the agricultural sector or policies have moved away in the constitution, quite rightly, agriculture was a state subject. But to look at how over the decades, there has not only been a shift towards the center, but more particularly a shift of how all agricultural policies are now being determined by the corporate sector. So really a major issue for us about decentralization, but also about the role of the state and what kind of democracy we have. Sorry, I'll just get my glass. What we have seen, as I mentioned, is over the decades, agriculture has become much more centralized. There has been a summary study done in 2022 by Soumitra Chatterjee and others in the EPW, in which they looked at agriculture and federalism. They show how, because of the compulsions immediately after independence, the compulsions of increasing food production, generally agricultural productivity, and in the 60s, there were a lot of crop failures, and then the need for putting in a large food distribution system. It meant that more and more the central governments played a key role. So just for recently looking at the data for up to 2022, they show how three key ministries have impacted agriculture. And these are the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers, especially through schemes such as PM Saman Nidhi. Then the Ministry of Fertilizers, which gives very large amounts of subsidies, although most of the subsidies go to the fertilizer industries. And then the Department of Food and Public Distribution, which is the PDS, the Food Grain Distribution. Looking at just these three, although the other smaller departments, irrigation, etc., they indicate a lot of regional inequalities, as what Professor Nataraj has highlighted as asymmetries, which are very visible. For example, in procurement, which is again determined by the center through the minimum support price, 7 states garner much of the MSP thing, and those are Punjab, Maharashtra, MP, Telangana, etc. Much of the subsidies, which are through the fertilizer subsidies and not through procurement, something as much as 20% of these subsidies go primarily only to Uttar Pradesh, not only for example, PM Kisan, but because Uttar Pradesh has 1/5 of all the agricultural households in the country. So the regions or the states that are neglected are then the eastern ones, which are Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, West Bengal, and Bihar. So if this is just a summary, I want to add that it would be very inadequate for us to look at how there has been more and more centralization of the agriculture sector towards the center making decisions, and the states have less roles to play. In fact, it's much more complex, where we're looking at not only the entry of corporate sectors, but the extent to which even the state's attention to agriculture is very inadequate. And I will make a case for why it has to be decentralized to sub-regional levels, not only to the panchayat level, as was elaborated, but also to very specifically agroclimatic zones, etc. So in the emphasis on in all the problems that Soumitra Chatterjee and others have highlighted, they've not looked at overall what has been the approach to agriculture since independence and up to now, which I think has been marked by great contradictions, as someone highlighted. Ambedkar had called attention to the fact that we must look at how in the nation contradictions would grow, and we're seeing that very, very visibly in rural India. First is all the policies, including the Green Revolution, which as a model has consolidated across the country, has led to a consolidation of the caste and class system, and not really an erosion of the privileges of caste and class, especially the upper caste. But at the opposite of that is the strong erosion of the very rich and very important and sophisticated knowledge systems that were associated with agricultural production, because of the given sharp diversities we've had from the cold regions up north, Ladakh, Kashmir, etc., right up to Kerala. We have very different agricultural systems and different biodiversities, and knowledge systems match those to sustain or to work those. A strong erosion of that, but also a sort of bypassing of many of the local systems that were in existence. Along with this, I have identified, and I've written about this elsewhere, is that it's matched by a contradictory economic system and a contradictory political system, which is in economics, in the kind of economic policy towards rural India and especially in agriculture. There's the economics of neglect, which is neglect of the dry lands, there's neglect of the landless workers, small and marginal farmers, and infrastructure, which should have been infrastructure for supporting agriculture, not just taking agricultural material to the markets. but also in inadequate support to appropriate technologies which would have helped sustainability. Opposite of that, in fact, not so much opposite, but complementing the inadequacies of this economic perspective, which is very biased, has been a politics of rescue, which is especially policies announced during election times or just before elections, which are primarily populist and meant to garner votes. These have been so many, but just in the most recent memory, and which have had very big significance both economically and politically, have been the moratorium of loans, which the Congress announced in 2005, in which the loans were forgiven for large numbers of farmers, primarily large commercial farmers and all their loans. 2019, very important, which we know, especially in North Indian belt, which determined the elections, which was the PM Kisan Fund, which was allocation of up to 12,000 rupees uh, for every farming household. Free electricity, which different states give every now and then a range of other kind of populist schemes, which the states, both center and state, deploy. So as a result of which, and I'll just very quickly flag some of these concerns, is that what has been the impact of this contradictory thing, an economics of neglect, but a politics of rescue that is deployed to the agricultural sector. One is this other big contradiction, which very good scholars, for example, Glenn Stone, writing about India's green revolution and higher productivity, says this is you become a victim of your own success, which is, of course, Punjab representing high productivity per acre, but really does not have overall growth or well-being. So as productivity has increased, you know, we have surplus, especially in terms of only grains, primarily cereal, but average annual income has actually been declining, especially over the past 2.5 decades, which has now been documented. And all policies now talk about, which if you remember in the 2019 election, that was also one of the key slogans: improve farmers' incomes, and all the programs are to that. Subsequently, there has been this contradiction of the onset of distress, agrarian distress, not only suicide, in the most commercial, high productive areas. So has a major contradiction. But the other side of this, and which has not been, it has been documented, but not the links not made so substantially, is the consolidation of the caste system has meant the rise of the dominant caste as key political players, getting elected into the legislative assemblies and into the parliament, becoming regional satraps, becoming laws unto themselves, and raising all the questions we've had since yesterday about the problem of representativity. How much do they really represent the people who vote for them? Which is also why very visible in the parliament, where a large numbers is supposed to represent this, almost 60% of the population from agricultural sector, but very few questions are actually raised in the parliament about agricultural policies or agricultural issues. Third is the food security, food in terms of cereals and through the distribution system. As we saw during COVID, about 80% of households now are receiving their primary source of food through the public distribution system. So food security is being addressed, but not nutritional security. So again, the contradiction of how even in the high cereal producing belts, we are now documenting malnutrition, especially among children, because of the change in food cultures, loss of millets, of pulses, oil seeds, etc., and therefore leading to all forms of malnutrition. Finally, ecological, which Mr. Wambatkere detailed, is not only exacerbated now by climate change, but extant and devastating erosion of agricultural lands, not only the depletion of soil, but the loss of water, the water table having sunk, but very significantly loss of biodiversity, etc. So what we are seeing under these conditions are the fact that agriculture is no longer just about production, but has a system, it's moving much more towards becoming extractive, and land itself, even agricultural land, is becoming part of the speculative economy, where it's becoming part of the real estate game. So under these conditions, purely, of course, the central kind of policies don't pay attention to what is happening in diverse parts with such details as is required. But even many of the states have compromised positions as to what needs to be done to cater to very low or to regional needs. As a result of which, what we are seeing across the country is many agricultural policies are now being made under closed doors, corporate, both national corporates and transnational corporate companies are calling the shots, making the decisions. As many of you know, last month, a very exhaustive report was released, which showed that the reason the central government tried to promulgate the three farm laws, and actually then through ordinance made the acts, which was so draconian, and the Punjab farmers rose up against it, etc., was because the Adani company had written to Niti Aayog asking for the opening of the market for free trade, etc. And they're saying now, of course, the linkages are coming. But we all along we knew that this was being done only to promote corporate interests and not that of the rural or generally the Indian population itself. Along with that, that was not the only issue. The promotion of genetically modified seeds, smart technologies, including drone. For example, almost every southern state now says any problem you have, use a drone to either seed your land, do deweed your land, put even pesticides, etc. Or the promotion of fortified food, and now very, very dangerous, both ecologically dangerous and very bad for health, is the promotion of toxic herbicides into the lands, which are being promoted by these companies and endorsed by the state. So in this context, what kind of decentralization should we imagine? What kind of decentralization do we think should take place? So we must assert that the agriculture as a sector must come back, as the constitution has stipulated, into the state, into various states. States must be much more engaged and not give up the sector. In the state, it would be inadequate to have them by district wise, which is what they're doing now. It has to be devolved into what are called agroclimatic zones, more than 124 zones, and within which we see, based on ecological conditions, agriculture has to be fine-tuned to what is suitable to those areas. More than that, I think we have to develop new parameters in decentralization, new parameters to assess agriculture and rural development or welfare, which would be going beyond productivity, looking at sustainability and overall welfare of the people. Two categories of people we saw who are a majority, who have consistently been neglected, have been the landless working class and the small and marginal farmers, who form something like 86%. And the average land holding size is only 1.15 hectare. So how would those interests be catered to? So these should be the parameters. And again, very strongly sustainability rather than purely productivity that should be endorsed. So with this, one of the arguments some of us have been making, and here I speak on behalf of the Network for Rural and Agrarian Studies, of which I'm a member, which is to move beyond subsidies, to move beyond these popular schemes which are just announced at election times, to try and incentivize agriculture and a comprehensive rural development in a way in which you address the key problems, which is one, incentivize integration of land holdings. As you know, these handkerchief size holdings, 1.15 hectare, are no longer economically viable. It also accounts for the large proportions of people to abandon land. When yesterday we were talking about migration, this accounts for this. Those holdings are no longer economically viable. And with this kind of climate change, which you have sharp fluctuations in monsoon, etc., large numbers are abandoning cultivation and land and coming out. So to integrate small holdings into either group farming or what is called cooperative farming with the landless also, the landless workers are the repositories of knowledge and skills. Without them, the average land owning caste or groups cannot actually be in cultivation. So to empower them to have that, to leverage that, instead of just land holding, some measures have to be taken to uphold their rights and their abilities, to bring that into integration of restoring land. Instead of incentivizing inputs of fertilizers and pesticides, if land restoration through organic means, which are now non-chemical, there's so many ways, and in India they're very, very sophisticated and tried and tested methods to restore land back to fertility. And then also that those who have transitioned to chemical agriculture because of the spread of the Green Revolution 1 and 2, so much has now under industrial chemical agriculture, to come back to agroecology, to non-chemical agriculture, to incentivize them. And finally, to strengthen not only crop planning at the sub-regional agroclimatic zones too. So in this way, integrating all of this and incentivizing farmers would be much better than giving subsidies, etc. So decentralizing it to both the panchayat level and therefore then into the agroclimatic level and through the state actually playing a role. But having said that, I know it would be very simplistic to say we don't need the center at all, but center needs to play what is called a complementary role. Soumitra Chatterjee and others also highlight that, giving examples of how there are cases in which the states have actually been proactive and have come out with innovative schemes. For example, Orissa, since the past 5-6 years, has two very good programs. The Kalia program, in which there is incentivized money is given not only to small and marginal farmers, but also to landless workers. Also very successful has been the millet promotion scheme, where cultivation of millets has increased. It's into the public distribution system, but also into the Anganwadis and to the food systems, therefore directly catering to and reviving local food cultures and improving nutritional levels at all levels. So states need to play a key role. But in that, those regulations, for example, incentivizing regulations, all of which will have to be made by the state, but also endorsed very strongly by the center. To highlight all this, I would say this, it would be dangerous and inadequate to say this comes only from our experiences either in Karnataka or just India. This is the trend internationally, where the debates in economics are about degrowth economics, looking at economic cases and models in which it is not just productivity or growth, but much more sustainability and sharing and distribution are highlighted. It is to also enhance what are called circular economies now, where the divide between rural and urban, agriculture and industrial are questioned. We know everywhere, especially in South Asia, all the urban areas are bursting at the seams. They cannot grow anymore to any kind of healthy level. And therefore, rural areas have to be reindustrialized, much more production, work, employment, non-agricultural employment has to shift to the rural areas. So new kinds of circular economies have to come in, and where value addition, especially of agricultural products, can be shifted to rural areas. So this, I think, is also links to some of the major international debates that are taking place. Finally, I want to conclude by saying that I just, as I was reading up for this, I read Raghuram Rajan's book, which is called The Third Pillar, where he says, what kind of economy should we have which are between, not directly impacted or directed only by the state, nor are they completely subordinate to the market, in which then he looks at local community level decentralized models as being the way forward, especially for the 21st century. He calls it inclusive localism, inclusive in the sense that localism typically can also become very narrow, very focused, very bounded. So he gives lots of examples of how they can be exchanged between different international, national, regional economies into local economies also. So this is also one of the examples. So I'd like to conclude by saying that in looking at agriculture, in not about federalism through the agricultural sector, it highlights for us the extent to which democratic processes are very important, but also the need to decentralize not only to the sub-regional levels, but to also then empower actually citizens, as Mr. Ganesh Prasad talked about, the panchayat system to the smallest level where direct participation can be facilitated, participating not only politically, but also in the economic decision making. For example, which crop to grow, how to value add to it, etc. So overall, I want to conclude by saying that the return of the agricultural sector to the state and therefore to a decentralized model, has the constitution envisaged, would be very important. Thank you.
Underline one important and the topic of the day is more decentralized federal system essential. But they have underlined that both for development and for management, decentralization is very essential. But what is happening is centralization and corporatization, centralization and corporatization of agriculture. People are the last, the farmers last to the farmer to answer Adani's demand for bringing agriculture market into the corporate control. So these kind of centralization on the one hand, corporatization on the other hand, there is simple nature, both for democracy and development. I'm delighted at the way these scholars have presented. I will say what I want to say here now, the discussion, how they know. The word capitalism that takes from
When I was mentioning about the socio-economic cost census that was carried out by the Ministry of Rural Development, the total household size that was available with us was 1.15 crore households. Of it, 35 lakh households belong to the urban areas. 80 lakh households belong to the rural areas. Out of that 80 lakh households, only 1 lakh household data had to be rejected. Only 1 lakh out of 80 lakh households, 1 lakh household data had to be rejected, mainly because the data was incomplete. There were some gaps in the data, so we could not consider the 1 lakh household data. As I said earlier, the remaining 35 lakh data pertaining to the urban areas, that is being analyzed now. And by the end of this year, we will be coming out with the report. When it comes to the deprivation parameters, the Ministry of Rural Development identified 16 parameters, within which under the land, it was mainly the irrigated and the unirrigated land and other parameters for which the data was collected by the ministry. The other one was under the Watershed Development Ministry. At that particular point of time, Government of India thought that only ownership of the land is something which is much more important. So they have collected data only for that particular scenario. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for these questions. Yes, about caste and cooperatives. I just want to say even about mentioning, I didn't use the word thing, advisedly. Um, it could be even group farming, or for example, although farmer producer organizations have problems, any other kind of unit. Caste is a problem, but I feel emerging, for example, there are small case studies, we know at least in six various parts of India where intercaste groups have come together, where small landholders and landless workers have formed these what are called new production units, saying this is what we will produce and we will share the whatever the profits from the produce. So at least to give it a chance, I don't think any of us has a blueprint right now, even to address the other person's question. Absolutely, this alternative model has to be cooperative farming, or the typical cooperative farming as it was in China, or the collective farming as it was in Russia, etc. It would be very wrong to use those bad historical examples and try them in India. We need to try and innovate, create, and see, because things have changed. There are people who are coming out of caste identities. There are people who are struggling to attempt to have some new economic units. So why not try? That is what I'm trying to do. I want to say that in the few cases we have of this group farming, for example, many of you know Kudumba Shri, this is in Kerala, where women's groups have come together, landless women workers, rent in, take other people, land that is lying fallow. Many people have migrated out of Kerala. They are producing vegetables, etc. They are all multi-caste. In fact, in those cases, there is a rule in which Kudumba Shri production unit cannot be from only one caste. It has to be multi-caste, and it's actually working. So across India, I think some of these experiments, these endeavors should be tried and not written off. To the second speaker who said, this thing cannot be music, it may not be relevant to agriculture. I think it's very important. ಈ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕೃಷಿಲಿ ಹಾಡು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. ಮೊದಲು ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೃಷಿಲಿ ಹಾಡು ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು. ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಡುಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೊಲ ಇದರಿಂದನೇ ಬಂದಿರೋದು. ಹಾಗೆ let there be music, let us not deny music in any narratives of agriculture or rural India. So in that, I also say, of course, I recognize the importance of GATT. I didn't mention it, but it's well known that it was not 1991 per se that opened up neoliberalism thing. It started earlier. GATT was very important, and we know the kind of movements that took place, especially in Karnataka against GATT, which were important. So I recognize the importance for that. Thank you for highlighting that. In saying going beyond subsidies, I'm not saying don't give subsidies and privatize everything, let farmers look after themselves. Not at all. In fact, during the farmers' agitation, one of the papers that I wrote, one of the articles I wrote for the newspapers, I said, the MSP should be maximum support policy for farmers, not minimum support prices. What you're giving is actually pittance, and farmers demanding MSP for only crops is nothing. We've shown, for example, through the network, we have shown that supporting farmers only for agriculture is inadequate. All farmers, all rural residents need good health facilities. Why are you not improving the hospital systems, the health systems? Education is the single big one, apart from ill health. Any average citizen, rural especially, fall ill, whatever expenditure they incur immediately sends them back into the below poverty levels. So health, very important, and education. Why not good public institutions? All the rest, when I was talking about incentivize, give it directly to farmers who are trying new methods, onto groups. Incentivize, as Mr. Mohammed was asking, why not incentivize intercaste production groups? If you are intercaste production groups and you do your thing in this way and actually produce for the market, why would you not want to directly transfer benefits to them, or benefits to those who are using appropriate technology or local resources to restore their land? There is a condition of emergency in rural India. In every context, we're highlighting this, and everywhere we are saying this. But those attempts of decentralizing efforts and looking at plurality of efforts, which will suit different conditions, are not addressed at all. And that is what I was trying to say, that we need these decentralized multiple kinds of systems. Um, Mixed economy, there was a question at the back. Yes, very important, both at a national level. For example, some of the writings that are coming out about reviving not only the public sector along with the private sector, but also what I talked about was mixed rural economies. No longer should the rural be equated only with agriculture. We're showing that non-farm rural economies have become so important in rural areas. Something like 52% of households are now getting their major income from non-agriculture. So retail has grown, all that has, services have grown in rural areas. So why not also have production units which do value addition, and therefore you have a new kinds of decentralized mixed economies. Finally, about PDS, how can it be distributed? I didn't rule out PDS thing. In fact, we need to strengthen PDS to make it shift from cereals only, especially hybridized, or what are called, now they're going to give fortified rice through PDS systems. PDS also needs to be decentralized, which is why Odisha's example of adding millets. For example, Karnataka also tried during Siddaramaya's previous regime. For a few months, they lifted large amounts of ragi and put it into the PDS system, which was very good. And it was given again during COVID only for 2 months. Then they didn't have sufficient, they withdrew it. Why not jowar in the northern belts for Karnataka, but wide variety of millets. For example, Tamil Nadu is now the leading producer and processor of millets. Why would it not go into those areas in which they eat that particular kind of food? So PDS, very important to not just dismantle it, but strengthen it, but also improve quality and access, different types. Anganwadis to schools, to Karnataka, lactating mothers, aged people. It covers the most vulnerable people. And I think that is what should be done with this kind of integrated approach, where you say, if you produce this locally, it can also go back into a local, not village per se or panchayat, but maybe district level or even regional level, which is what we are looking at. With very good studies are looking at nutritional insecurity. This could be one of the ways to address that. Thank you.
Dear friends, I'm sure we have all noticed that people who are working at the grassroots level, Rural Development Institute or Punashchit, a social, rural social organization, they bring a different perspective to the whole academic debate in institutions like this. And the issues are mainly, since yesterday, the question of democratic model and development model, we are questioning. Democratic model and development model with which we are concerned, either in the name of delimitation and in the sense of devolution, these are the issues that are there. And the whole wrong development models have led to wrong type of, benefits to the people. And that has been emphasized yesterday. And we are watching it. And the whole question is how to democratize development, to, in the sense, let people participate in development and bring the benefits to people. Development benefits to people. These are the two very important questions in the development model. How to involve the people in development and how to distribute the fruits of development to the people. But what is happening, as indicated by Professor Pasaraj after the GATT debates and globalization approach, is extreme commercialization, corporatization of the economies. And the resulting thing is the local involvement is set aside, and it is the bulldozing with high tech, high fertilizer, high dams, everything with big capital it is bulldozing our economic developments. And consequently, as a student of political science, I see it is this model which is leading to undermining democracy, undermining federalism, because centralization will help corporatization and capitalization much better, because one authority will give you a license permit and you can start if Adani demands marketization of agricultural field and central government passes laws. So this is the way it's happening, and the result is our democracy and development both are our federalism, all are in the under threat of under threat. So keeping this in mind, I would like to point out that, see, most essential thing is our democracy. If democracy is lost, even development will be lost. Already what's happening in the name of development, because of centralization of power, Thomas Piketty's 1% owning 50% kind of inequality. In our economic system, growth, production is there, but who is getting it? 1% of the people are controlling 50% of the economy, and 10% of the people control about 95% of the economy. If this kind of a thing strengthens concentration of power, democracy is not all power to people. We think democracy is all power to people. No, experts point out it is all power to none. All power to none. Why? There should be government by discussion, government by check and balance, government by discussion, government by check and balance, so that, see, the models of development or models of governance are vetted by people's needs and it satisfies them ultimately. So it is in this context, first I would say democracy needs full defense because it is under danger. In many ways, I don't want to go into that. Democracy in India is under decline in many ways. And there are international authorities who have listed this and debates are going on. Number one. Second, our federalism. Our federalism is an instrument of defending democracy. Why? Because, see, all power to none, essence of democracy. In federal system, all power to center is opposed. There are different levels of power distribution, center, states, and local. And if power is distributed like this, that is federal system. And if it functions well, your democracy is safe. And that is why our federal system needs a kind of what has happened. Since yesterday, people have emphasized there is a center-tilted federal system working in India. More subjects, well, more powers, more resources to the center, and state schemes are being taken away, like education, like even agriculture. In many ways, central schemes. Center says we are giving you money. Center scheme. You have to follow this. If you don't follow, we will deny you resources. Just one example I read in paper 2 days ago. For Kerala, they are insisting smart electricity meters shall be compulsorily installed in each house. This smart electricity meter business is a 11,500 crore business. And they might have given a contract to some corporate and they want that to be implemented. And if Kerala says, no, we don't want it, we have got other ways of implementing, rationalizing power distribution, the punishment is 9,000 crore rupees of central aid Kerala would lose. This is the way our federal system, this is the direction our federal system is taking. We have to be watchful. We have to be careful. And that way we should save both democracy and federalism. And coming to local governments, you see, decentralized federal system, more decentralized, is it essential? I will mention very briefly 2 points. One, yes, decentralized federal system is essential. I had written a paper long ago about sub-state government. Sub-state government. You see, Indian states are so big, their economic problems in different regional, climatic and geographical regions, their problems are so different. For example, in Karnataka, Kurg is a different geographical system and social system too. And their problems are not the same as the dry Gulbarga or say wet Mandya. So you will have to take into consideration the needs of the different see parts of the state, and therefore I had written our need for sub-state government. Latest example, Manipur is indicating this. See, people of Manipur, particularly the Kukis and Zos, have lost confidence in the government of Métis, Métis dominated Manipur government. What is the result? See, without consent of the people, without confidence of the people, no gun can rule. Nobody can impose a rule only through gun. And that is visible in Manipur, where it is burning. Every day open a newspaper, so many deaths, so many new problems. So the reason now is, that is why in Indian Constitution, tribal areas are given special powers to govern themselves. Special powers to govern themselves, tribal areas. So I am not going into all the details, but I am just indicating. And similarly, I would say maybe in Manipur to establish law and order and make them feel that we are India. If you don't take them into confidence, they may say, where is India? What is India for me? I don't care, because they are not caring for us. The leader is not coming to us. The leader is not solving our problem. Our families are being in tented places, haunted places. Why should I be an Indian? So that kind of a question divides, destroys India, not only our development and our democracy. So that is why one thing is sub-state governments are essential. How to design it, let us think about it. And the second aspect is local government. See, local government is the real government. It is the first government, because in the world, all the first governments are at the local level. Panchayat, village panchayat, it started there. Only gradually governments at the higher level came into the picture. And that led to centralization and then regulation and controlling of local government. And that has resulted today in central governments becoming more powerful, local government becoming so helpless. But both your democracy and development need effective local government. That is why in India, along with your community development, your Panchayat Raj movement started. Along with your community development itself, Panchayat Raj movement started. But Panchayat did not work well, and that is why we have to bring in 73rd, 74th constitutional amendment to make local government third sector of our federal system. So now what has happened is our our local governments have entered the constitution. They have become the third sector. But unfortunately, till today, powers and resources are not properly distributed to local governments from the center and the state. The local bodies, PRIs and urban governments are at the mercy of state governments. They are still left at the mercy of state government. And state government, they are not interested in losing any power. They are already having less power when compared to center, and therefore they don't want to lose more power downward. So the resulting thing is local governments are still in a way namesake, though their problems have burgeoned. See, Delhi like a city like Delhi with 2.5 crore rupees, with the 2.5 crore population, 2.5 crore population, it is so big. The problems are so big. Governing that, say you don't have a proper mechanism. So that is why I for one would just suggest 3 or 4 principles. I'm just I would read them and I'm let you think. I would say, and I will move on. See, local governments requires establishment of Keri or street sabhas or councils. Keri panchayat, I call it. For 12th Mile Saraswatipuram, there shall be a panchayat, so that people in that area get involved, suggest what necessary. So one thing is bringing down local government up to street level. Then secondly, directly elected presidents and mayors. You see, what is happening to local bodies is local bodies have become token bodies, nominal bodies, token bodies and nominal bodies. Why? Because no strong leadership is allowed to emerge there. No strong leadership is allowed to emerge there. That is why a directly elected municipal president, a directly elected village panchayat chairman, he will stand up and bargain with the higher governments for better decentralization. So I, for one, would argue, otherwise you try to say 30 months chairmanship, 30-month chairmanship, rotation, chairmanship by rotation, all these are unfunctional because they don't provide, there won't be a backbone, a stamina to the local government. So this is second thing. Third thing is cabinet forum of municipal government. Our corporations are so big and so huge. They are having the many United Nations members may not have the same size of population as Bombay or Delhi. But the government here is run by a mayor and it is not mayor and council. These kind of systems are not sufficient. There must be a cabinet form of government there. And then finally, local servants, technical and civil servants. What is happening? Local bodies are made to depend upon state and central civil services. An IAS officer has to be brought in as a mayor, as a commissioner of your city. An IAS officer. So for everything you are depending so much upon center and states, how can you have your own government? Self-government, we call it, local self-government. Local self-government is never possible without your own resources, assured resources, financial and human. That is why, finally, I would say there must be scope for establishing specialized local government, managerial and technical resource services. So with this, it will be helpful to strengthen both our democracy, federalism, and then our development model in a better way. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷೀಯ ನುಡಿಗಳನ್ನು ನುಡಿದ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಎಂ ಉಮಾಪತಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಇದೀಗ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯ ಕೊನೆಯ ಹಂತ, ವಂದನಾರ್ಪಣೆ. ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ವಿಕೇಂದ್ರೀಕೃತ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಅಗತ್ಯವೇ ಎಂಬ ವಿಷಯದ ಕುರಿತು ವಿಷಯವನ್ನು ಮಂಡಿಸಿದ ಗೌರವಾನ್ವಿತರಾದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ GS ಗಣೇಶ್ ಪ್ರಸಾದ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ತುಂಬು ಹೃದಯದ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಇದೇ ವಿಷಯದ ಕುರಿತು ಮಾತನಾಡಿದ ಮತ್ತೋರ್ವ ಗೌರವಾನ್ವಿತರಾದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ AR ವಾಸವಿ ಅವರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ತಿಳಿಸುತ್ತೇನೆ. ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷತೆಯನ್ನು ವಹಿಸಿ ಯಶಸ್ವಿಗೊಳಿಸಿದಂತಹ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಎಂ ಉಮಾಪತಿ ಸರ್ ಅವರಿಗೂ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ತಿಳಿಸುತ್ತೇನೆ. ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರುವಂತಹ ಸರ್ವರಿಗೂ ನನ್ನ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನು ತಿಳಿಸುತ್ತೇನೆ. ಇದೀಗ ಚಹಾ ವಿರಾಮ. ಚಹಾ ಸೇವಿಸಿದ ನಂತರ 2 ದಿನಗಳ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಸಮ್ಮೇಳನದ ಕುರಿತು ತಜ್ಞರ ಅಭಿಮತವನ್ನು ಆರಂಭವಾಗುತ್ತದೆ. ಆದ್ದರಿಂದ ಸಭಿಕರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಭಾಂಗಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಜರಿರಬೇಕೆಂದು ಈ ಮೂಲಕ ಕೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೇನೆ. ಟೀ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಇದೆ.
ಅತ್ತೆಯ ಅಮಾವಾಸ್ಯೆಗೆ ಹಣತೆ ನೀನಾಗು. ನೊಂದ ಜನರ ಕಣ್ಣೀರ ಒರೆಸುವ ಹೃದಯವಂತನಾಗೋ. ನೊಂದ ಜನರ ಕಣ್ಣೀರ ಒರೆಸುವ ಹೃದಯವಂತನಾಗೋ. ಕಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆದು ಶಿಲೆಯಾಗಿ ಒಳೆದು ಗೌರವಿಪ ಮೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗೋ. ಮಾನವತವಾದಿಯಾಗೋ. ಮಾನವತವಾದಿಯಾಗೋ. ಕಂದ ಕಂದ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರರಂತಾಗೋ. ಕಂದ ಕಂದ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರರಂತಾಗೋ. ಮಾನವತೆಗೆ ಹೊಸದಾರಿ ತೋರಿದ ಮಂಟೆ ಸ್ವಾಮಿಯಾಗು. ಮಾನವತೆಗೆ ಹೊಸದಾರಿ ತೋರಿದ ಮಂಟೆ ಸ್ವಾಮಿಯಾಗು. ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಕನಗೆ ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿಯಾದ ಮಾತೆ ಸುಂದರಂತಾಗು. ಒಕ್ಕಲು ತನಗೆ ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿಯಾದ ಮಾತೆ ಸುಂದರಂತಾಗು. ಇವನಮ್ಮವ ಎಂದ ಅಣ್ಣ ಬಸವನಾಗೋ. ಲೋಕಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಳಕಾಗು. ಈ ಲೋಕಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಳಕಾಗು. ಕಂದ ಕಂದ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರರಂತಾಗು. ಕಂದ ಕಂದ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರರಂತಾಗು. ಕರುಣಶೀಲ ಜ್ಞಾನವಂತ ಬುದ್ಧನಂತಾಗು. ಬುದ್ಧನಂತಾಗು. ನೀ ಬುದ್ಧನಂತಾಗು. ಕಂದ ಕಂದ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರರಂತಾಗು. ಕಂದ ಕಂದ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರರಂತಾಗು. ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.
Good afternoon, one and all. Now the session is panel discussion session. Now I call upon our dignitaries on the dais. Please, firstly, Professor Venkatramaya sir, please come up on the stage. I request our professors to bring up on the stage. And Nadoja Shri Devnura Mahadeva sir, please come up on the stage, sir. Professor Ravi Verma Kumar, former Advocate General Karnataka, please come up on the stage, sir. And Professor Janaki Nair, Professor of the History, JNU, New Delhi, please ma'am, come up on the stage. Professor Nagaraju, former Professor MIDS, Chennai, sir, please come up on the stage. Professor TR Chandrasekhar sir, former Professor, Kannada University, Hampi, sir, please come up on the stage, sir. And Shri VN Ravi Kumar, Professor, former Director, CART, NIE, Mysuru, sir, please come up on the stage, sir. And Dr. R Srinivasa, member of the Tamil Nadu State Planning Commission, sir, please come up on the stage, sir. And Dr. Swarnamala Sirsi, Professor of the Physics, YCM, University of Mysore, madam, please come up on the stage, madam. It's my responsibility to honor our chief guest on the dais. I request our research scholars to honor our chief guest on the dais. Firstly, I welcome the chairperson of this session, Professor V. Venkatramaya, sir. I welcome you, sir, former Vice Chancellor, Kuvempu University. I humble to welcome you, sir. And Sri Devnur Mahadeva, sir, I welcome you, sir. I warmly welcome you, sir. Behalf of Mysore University and Ambedkar Research and Extension Center, Professor Ravi Verma Kumar, former Advocate General Karnataka, I welcome you, sir. And Professor Janki Nair, Professor of the History, JNU, New Delhi, I welcome you, ma'am. Former Professor of the History. And Dr. Nagraj, former Professor of MIDS, Chennai, I welcome you, sir, behalf of Mysore University, Ambedkar Chair, and Indian Polity Forum. And Professor T.R. Chandrasekhar, former Professor Karnataka University, Hampi, I welcome you, sir. Shri V.N. Ravi Kumar, former Director, CARI, NI, Mysuru, I welcome you, sir. Dr. R. Srinivasan, member of the Tamil Nadu State Planning Commission, I warmly welcome you, sir. And Dr. Swarnamala Sirsi, Associate Professor of the Philosophy, I welcome you, sir. Sorry, ma'am. I welcome you, ma'am. Sorry, Physics. Now I request to Professor Venkatramaya, sir, who is going to chair this session, to take over this session. Sir, please, sir.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. Good evening to one and all. Friends, the organizers, after looking at the theme of the conference, have realized that it encompasses a very wide spectrum of issues related to socio-economic and political aspects. Therefore, a large number of panelists have been identified, and I think each one of them is known in his or her field. And I think it is not the occasion to say anything about their scholarship or merits. I only, since we are allotted about 90 minutes for this particular program, and there are 9 persons occupying the dais, and so therefore I have to have some structured time factor for this program. So since there are 9 persons, I would probably suggest that since there is a 90 minutes program, maybe I can take the liberty of extending it to 100 minutes. And each one of them, panelists, can take about 6 minutes. That means 54 minutes can be utilized for that. And the remaining 46 minutes, maybe it can be utilized for discussion by the questions raised by the audience, and that will be probably more appropriate. Therefore, since 9 members are there, I would like to take the liberty of inviting first Professor Ravi Kumar, and then Nadoja Sri Devnor Mahadeva, then Dr. Janaki Nair, then Professor Srinivasan, ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ರೀ. I have changed that. Please give me that liberty. I request Professor Ravi Kumar to initiate the discussion, and then followed by that Nadoja Maha Devnu Maha.
ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ವೆಂಕಟರಾಮಯ್ಯ ಅವರೇ ಹಾಗೂ ವೇದಿಕೆಯ ಮೇಲಿರುವ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ನಾನು ಯಾಕೆ ಮೊದಲು ಬಂದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ರವಿ ಏನಾರು ಮೊದಲು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಏನೇನೋ ಲಾ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಗಳು ಸೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾನು ಬರೆದಿರೋದು ಸರಿಯೋ ತಪ್ಪೋ ಈ ತರ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡೋರು. ನಾನು ಬರೆದಿರೋದನ್ನ ಓದ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಕೂಡ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡೋದು ನನಗೆ. ಇಂಥ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಿಂದ ತಪ್ಪಿಸ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅಸರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಿಗೆ ಹಕ್ಕನ್ನು ಚಲಾಯಿಸಿದೆ. ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಇಂದು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತಿರುವ ಅಂತರ್ರಾಜ್ಯ ಅಸಮತೆ ಮತ್ತು ಅದರ ಪರಿಣಾಮಗಳು ಎಂಬ ಗಂಭೀರವಾದ, ಜಟಿಲವಾದ ಹಾಗೂ ಸಂಕೀರ್ಣವಾದ ಈ ಚಿಂತನಾ ಸಭೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಮಯವಾಗಿದೆ. ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಓದುತ್ತಿದ್ದರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಕೇಳುತ್ತಿದ್ದರೆ ನನಗೆ ಅರ್ಥವಾದುದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಅರ್ಥವಾಗದೇ ಇರುವುದೇ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅನಿಸತೊಡಗುತ್ತದೆ. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಾನು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡಿರುವುದರಲ್ಲಿ ತಪ್ಪಿರಬಹುದಾ ಎಂಬ ಅನುಮಾನ ಪಿಸಾಚಿ ಇಣುಕಿ ನೋಡುತ್ತಿರುತ್ತದೆ. ಇಂತಹ ಸಂಕಷ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿರುವ ನಾನು ಈಗ ತಜ್ಞ ಅಂದುಕೊಂಡು, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪರ್ಟ್ ಅಂದುಕೊಂಡು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಚರ್ಚಿತವಾಗುತ್ತಿರುವ ವಿಚಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೊದಲನೆಯದು, ಮುಂದುವರೆದ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಆದಾಯದ ಹಣಕಾಸನ್ನು ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಅನುದಾನವಾಗಿ ನೀಡುವುದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇದೆ. ಇದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಮುಂದುವರೆದಿರುವುದೇ ತಪ್ಪೆ ಎಂಬ ವಾದವೂ ಕೂಡ ಹುಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ. ನೋಡುವುದಾದ್ರೆ ಇಂಥ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಆಯಾಯ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಳಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ. ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ನಡುವೆ ಇರೋದು ಬೇರೆ, ಇಂಥ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಳಗಡೆನೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ನಮ್ಮ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲೇ ಇರುವ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ವಿಶೇಷ ಅನುದಾನ ನೀಡುವುದಿಲ್ವೇ? ನಾವು ಒಂದು ರಾಜ್ಯವಾಗಿದ್ದೇವೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಸಹಜ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ಎಂದುಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಒಪ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಸ್ವಾತಿ ಶಿವಾನಂದ್ ಅವರು ಜಾಗೃತ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸಮಾವೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತನಾಡುತ್ತಾ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಏಕೀಕರಣದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾಪ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಆಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಇಂಥವೇ ವಾದಗಳು ಇದ್ದುವಂತೆ, ಬಹಳ ಬಲವಾಗೇ ಇದ್ದುವಂತೆ. ಆಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೈಸೂರು ಪ್ರಾಂತ್ಯದವ್ರಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಮುಂದುವರೆದಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಉತ್ತರ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳನ್ನು ಸೇರಿಸಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಅವರನ್ನು ನಾವು ಸಾಕಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಬರುತ್ತದೆ ಎಂಬ ಭಾವನೆ ಇತ್ತಂತೆ. ಆಗ ಇಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಆಸಕ್ತಿದಾಯಕ ಸಂಗತಿಯನ್ನು ಸ್ವಾತಿ ಹೇಳುತ್ತಾರೆ. ವಾಸ್ತವದಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಂಬೈ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಂದಿತ್ತು ಹಾಗೂ ಹೈದರಾಬಾದ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಆಹಾರ ಧಾನ್ಯ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆಯನ್ನು ಹೊಂದಿದ್ದ ಪ್ರದೇಶವಾಗಿತ್ತು ಎನ್ನುತ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದೇ ರೀತಿ ಛತ್ತೀಸ್ಗಢ ಇಡೀ ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಕಾಗುವಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರಾಕೃತಿಕ ಸಂಪತ್ತನ್ನ ಪಡೆದುಕೊಂಡಿದೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ಮಾತು ಕೂಡ ಇದೆ. ಕೊಡಿ ನಂದ ಇದು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಇದರ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟತೆಗಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಬೃಹತ್ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ನೋಡಿದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ 1 ಕೋಟಿಗೂ ಮಿಗಿಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆ ವಿನಿಮಯ ದರ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿರುವ ITBT ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇನ್ನಿತರ ವಹಿವಾಟುಗಳ ಕಾರಣವಾಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವವರಿಗೆ ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆ ದರವು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿರುವ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಅವರ ಆದಾಯವೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿದೆ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ತೆರಿಗೆ ಕಟ್ಟುವ ಈ ಅದೃಷ್ಟವಂತರಿಗೆ ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ವಿನಿಮಯ ದರ ಇರುವ ಯಾವುದು ಆಹಾರ ಪದಾರ್ಥಗಳು ಸಿಗದೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅವ್ರು ದುಡಿತಾ ಇದಾರಪ್ಪ, 1 ಲಕ್ಷ 2 ಲಕ್ಷ 3 ಲಕ್ಷ ಈ ತರ ಎಲ್ಲ ದುಡಿತಾರೆ. ಕೆಲವು ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್ಗಳು ಕೋಟ್ಯಾಂತರ ರೂಪಾಯಿ ದುಡಿತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಏನಂತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ರ ಇವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆ ದರನಲ್ಲಿ ಇವ್ರಿಗೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದೆ, ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆ ದರ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಆಹಾರ ಪದಾರ್ಥಗಳು, ಇವುಗಳು ಸಿಗದೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅವರು ವಿದೇಶಗಳಿಂದ ಆಹಾರ ಪದಾರ್ಥಗಳನ್ನ ಆಮದು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಜೀವನ ಸಾಗಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಬಂದಿದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು? ಅವರ ದುಡಿಮೆ ತಿಂಗಳ ಕೊನೆಗೆ ಸಾಲದೆ ಕಣ್ಣು ಬಾಯಿ ಬಿಡಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಬರುತ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಈ ಸಂವೇದನೆ ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಆದಾಯದ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನೂ ಪೊರೆಯುತ್ತಿರುವ ಇತರ ಕಡೆಗೂ ಹರಿಯಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವುದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ನಾನು ಹೇಳುತ್ತಿರುವುದು ಇಷ್ಟೇ, ನಾವು ಒಂದು ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇರಿದವರಾದ್ದರಿಂದ ಹೇಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ರಾಜ್ಯದೊಳಗಿನ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲು ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೇವೆಯೋ ಹಾಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶವು ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟವಾಗಿರುವುದರಿಂದ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕವಾಗಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅನುದಾನ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಂಡರೆ ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ, ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೊಳ್ಳಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ದೇಶದ ಹಸಿವು ಮತ್ತು ಬಡತನಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಪಂದಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಈಗ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿಯವರೆಗೆ? ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ಆಗುವವರೆಗೆ, ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಎಲ್ಲಿಯವರೆಗೆ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಉತ್ತರ ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆಯೋ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಭಾರತದ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ನೀತಿಗಳು ಹೆಂಗಿದೆಯಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಕಥೆ ಇದೆ, ಹುಲಿಗೆ ಹುಣ್ಣು ಬಂದ ಕಥೆ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹುಲಿಗೆ ಹುಣ್ಣು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಒಂದು ಹುಲಿಗೆ ಹುಣ್ಣು ಬಂತಂತೆ. ಹುಣ್ಣು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಗಾಯ ಏನೋ. ಆ ಹುಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕಡೆ ಗಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ತನಗಿದ್ದ ಹುಣ್ಣನ್ನು ಕಿತ್ತು ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಗಾಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದ ಜಾಗಕ್ಕೆ ಅದನ್ನು ನೆಟ್ಟಿತಂತೆ. ಹುಲಿ ಹುಣ್ಣಿನ ಕತೆ ಹೀಗೇ ಸಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಭಾರತವು ಹೀಗೆ ಸಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ರೋಗ ಲಕ್ಷಣಗಳಿಗೆ ಮದ್ದು ನೀಡುತ್ತಿದೆ, ರೋಗ ಉಳಿದೇ ಇದೆ. ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಆಯ್ತು, ರೋಗ ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆ? ನಮ್ಮ SR ಹಿರೇಮಠರ ಬಾಳಕಥನದ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಸಂಗ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು. SR ಹಿರೇಮಠ ಗೊತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಅವರ ಬಾಳಕಥನ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಸಂಗ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು. ಇಸ್ವಿ 1900 68, 69 SR ಹಿರೇಮಠರು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ವ್ಯಾಸಂಗಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಅಮೆರಿಕದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾಗ ಎಡ್ಗರ್ ಓವನ್ ಅವರು ಬರೆದ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ರಿಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಪುಸ್ತಕದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತುಕತೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅಮೆರಿಕದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದ ಭಾರತೀಯ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಸಂಘವು ಎಡ್ಗರ್ ಓವನ್ ಅವರೊಂದಿಗೆ ಸಂವಾದ ಏರ್ಪಡಿಸಿದಾಗ ಅವರು ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾಪಿಸಿದ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಸಂಗತಿ ಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಡೌನ್ ಥಿಯರಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. ಓವನ್ ಅವರು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅವರು ಬಡತನ ನಿವಾರಣಾ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಏಷ್ಯಾ ಮತ್ತು ಆಫ್ರಿಕಾಗಳಲ್ಲಿ 16 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಕಾರ್ಯವನ್ನ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸಿದ್ರು. ಅವರು 10 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಅವರು ತಮ್ಮ ಅನುಭವದ ವ್ಯತೆಯನ್ನು ಭಾರತೀಯ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳೊಡನೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತಾರೆ. ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆಯು ಮೇಲ್ವರ್ಗದ ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಸಂಪತ್ತು ಮಾಡಲು ಉತ್ತೇಜನ ಕೊಟ್ಟರೆ ಆಗುವ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿಯು ಕೆಳಗೆ ತೊಟ್ಟಿಕ್ಕುತ್ತಾ ತಳಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಬಡವರಿಗೂ ತಲುಪಿ ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಏಳಿಗೆ ಆಗುತ್ತದೆ ಎಂಬ ಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಡೌನ್ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತವು, ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಎಡ್ಗರ್ ಓವನ್, ನನ್ನ ಸುದೀರ್ಘ ಅನುಭವದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಚರಣೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದ ನಿದರ್ಶನಗಳು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಎಡ್ಗರ್ ಓವನ್ ಅವರು. ಕೊನೆಗೆ ಇದೊಂದು ಫೈಲ್ಡ್ ಸೋತ ಥಿಯರಿ ಅಂತಾರಪ್ಪ. ಇಂದು ಕೂಡ ಈ ಥಿಯರಿಗೆ ಜೋತು ಬಿದ್ದ ಭಾರತದ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ತಜ್ಞರು ಹಾಗೂ ನಮ್ಮ ನಟರಾಜ್ ಸಾಹೇಬರು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಈ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ತಿಳುವಳಿಕೆ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು ನಮ್ಗೆ. ಇಂದು ಕೂಡ ಈ ಥಿಯರಿಗೆ ಜೋತು ಬಿದ್ದ ಭಾರತದ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ತಜ್ಞರು ಹಾಗೂ ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವ ಅಸಮರ್ಥ ನಾಯಕತ್ವ, ಇವತ್ತು ರೂಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ, ಅಥವಾ ಇದುವರೆಗೆ ಆ ಅಸಮರ್ಥ ನಾಯಕತ್ವ ಈ ಥಿಯರಿಗೆ ಜೋತು ಬಿದ್ದು ನೇತಾಡುತ್ತಾ ತೇಲಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಥಿಯರಿಗೆ ಅನುಗುಣವಾಗಿ ಅಂಬಾನಿ, ಅದಾನಿ ಇತ್ಯಾದಿ 100 ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್ ಉಳ್ಳವರಿಗೆ ದೇಶ ಸಂಪತ್ತನ್ನು ಸುರಿಯುತ್ತಿದ್ದು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಜೆಗಳು ಮೇಲಿಂದ ತಮಗೂ ಒಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಸೋರಬಹುದೆಂದು ಕಾಯುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. 1% ಜನರಿಗೆ 40% ಸಂಪತ್ತನ್ನು ಮೇಲಿಂದ ಸುರಿದುದಕ್ಕೆ ಅದು ತಳಕಚ್ಚಿರುವ 50% ಜನರಿಗೆ ತೊಟ್ಟಿಕ್ಸ್ ಇರುವುದು, ಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಡೌನ್ ಆಗಿರೋದು ಎಷ್ಟಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ 3% ಮಾತ್ರ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್, ಇದು ಆಕ್ಸ್ಫಾಮ್ ವರದಿ, ಈ ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್ ಸಂಪತ್ತು ಮಾಯಾ ರೂಪಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ವಿದೇಶಗಳಿಗೆ ವಲಸೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಸಂಪತ್ತು, ಭಾರತದ ಸಂಪತ್ತು ವಿದೇಶಗಳಿಗೆ ವಲಸೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಇರುವುದು, ಒಂದು ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕೊಡುತ್ತಾರೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಕೊಡುತ್ತಾರೆ ಎಂಬುದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಇಂಥ ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಪ್ರತ್ಯಕ್ಷವಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಪರೋಕ್ಷವಾಗಿ ಈ ಥಿಯರಿ ಅನುಕೂಲವಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ ಎಂಬುದರಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಹೀಗಿರುವಾಗ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ಆಗುವುದಾದ್ರೂ ಹೇಗೆ? ರಾಜ್ಯ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣವಾಗದೆ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ನಡುವೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಅಸಮತೋಲನ ನೀಗುವುದಾದರೂ ಹೇಗೆ? ಕಷ್ಟ. ಆದ್ರೂ ಒಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಸ್ಯಾಂಪಲ್ ತರ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳೋ ಅಷ್ಟೇನೆ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಯಾವಾಗ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಭಾರತವು ತನ್ನ ಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಡೌನ್ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ನೀತಿಯಿಂದ ಬಚಾವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಮಧ್ಯಮ ಹಾದಿಯನ್ನು ಕಂಡುಕೊಂಡಾಗ, ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಸ್ವಾಯತ್ತವಾಗಿ ವಿಕೇಂದ್ರೀಕರಣದ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಚಲಿಸಿದಾಗ, ಸ್ಥಳೀಯವಾಗಿ ಗುಡಿ ಕೈಗಾರಿಕೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾರುಕಟ್ಟೆ ದೊರಕಿದಾಗ, ಸಣ್ಣ ಸಣ್ಣ ಕೈಗಾರಿಕೆಗಳು ವಿಪುಲವಾದಾಗ, ಆಗ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳು ಅಲ್ಲಲ್ಲೇ ಹುಟ್ಟಿಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತವೆ. ನಿರುದ್ಯೋಗ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಬಗೆಹರಿಯುತ್ತದೆ. ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ಎಂಬ ಮಾತು ನಡೆದಾಡತೊಡಗುತ್ತದೆ. ಆಗ ಮಾತ್ರನೇ ಸಬಲೀಕರಣ ನಡೆದಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋದು. ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ಪರಿಸರ ಲೂಟಿ ನಿಲ್ಲಬೇಕು, ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಸ್ವಾಯತ್ತ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಸ್ವಾಯತ್ತ ಆಗಬೇಕು, ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕ ಸಂಪತ್ತು ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕವಾಗಿ ಉಳಿಯಬೇಕು. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ನ್ಯಾಯವು ನಡೆಯುತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು. ಹೀಗೆ ಇಂಥವು ಇನ್ನೂ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಇವು ಮಾತ್ರ ಭಾರತವನ್ನು ಕಾಪಾಡಬಲ್ಲವು. ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ನಡುವೆ ಸಮೀಪಿಸಬಹುದು, ಅಸಮತೆ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು. ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇದನ್ನ ಟ್ರಿಕಲ್ ಡೌನ್ ಥಿಯರಿ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅದು ಮೇಲೆ ಸುರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತದೆ, ಕೆಳಗೆ 3% ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಕಿತ್ತು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ, ಹುಲಿ ಹುಣ್ಣಿನ ಕಥೆ ಆಗತ್ತೆ. ಇದಾಗದೇನೆ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ಕೂತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ನಮ್ಮಿಂದ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಹೋಯ್ತು, ಅವರಿಂದ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಬಂತು, ಈ ಚರ್ಚೆನಲ್ಲೇ ನಾವು ಮುಳುಗೋಗ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು. ಈಗ ಎರಡನೇ ವಿಚಾರ, ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದಿರುವ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದ ಪುನರ್ವಿಂಗಡಣೆಗೆ ಬರುವುದಾದ್ರೆ, ಭಾರತ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ಪ್ರಪ್ರಥಮ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್, ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಭಾರತ್ ಶೆಲ್ ಬಿ ಎ ಯೂನಿಯನ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್, ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಆರಂಭಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತದೆ ನಾವು. ರವಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕೇಳ್ಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ನೀವು, ಇದನ್ನ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ರವಿ ಇದನ್ನ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಗಮನ ಕೊಡಿ, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಅಂದರೆ ಭಾರತವು ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟವಾಗುವುದಕ್ಕೂ ಮೊದಲು 560 ಚಿಲ್ಲರೆ ರಾಜಮನೆತನಗಳ ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆ ನಡೆಸುತ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಅವು ಇಂದಿನ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಆಕಾರ ಪಡೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಭಾರತದ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟವಾಗಲು ತುಂಬಾ ಕಸರತ್ತು ನಡೆದಿದೆ. ಅನೇಕ ಸವಾಲುಗಳನ್ನು ಎದುರಿಸಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಕೆಲವು ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಸವಲತ್ತು, ವಿಶೇಷ ಸ್ಥಾನಮಾನ ನೀಡಿಯೂ ಸೇರ್ಪಡೆ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಹೀಗಿರುವಾಗ ಹೊಸ ಆಕಾರ ಪಡೆದ ಪ್ರತಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಳಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅನೇಕ ರಾಜ ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆ, ಪಾಳೆಪಟ್ಟು, ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಹಿಡಿದ ಪ್ರಾಂತ್ಯ ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ಮಿಳಿತವಾಗಿ ಇಂದಿನ ರಾಜ್ಯ ಎಂಬ ಸ್ವರೂಪ ಪಡೆದು ಹುಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿವೆ. ಎಲ್ಲ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳು ಒಂದು ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯ ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇರ್ಪಡೆ. ಹೀಗೆ ರೂಪಿತಗೊಂಡ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಪ್ರಮುಖ ಭಾಷೆಯನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಗಡಿ ಅದರೊಳಗೆ ಸೇರಿರೋದು. ಈ ಮಾಡಿರೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ವಿವೇಚನೆ ಇದೆ. ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ ರಾಜ್ಯವನ್ನು ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಭಾಷೆಯವರು ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆ ನಡೆಸುವಂತಾಗಬಾರದು ಎಂಬ ಅಂತರ್ಗತ ಎಚ್ಚರವೂ ಅದರೊಳಗೆ ಅಡಗಿದೆ. ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಭಾಷೆನ ಬಿಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಆಗ ಭಾಷೆ ಆಧರಿಸಿಯೇ ಎಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡೋದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಮರ್ತೇ ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಾವು, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಈ ಎಚ್ಚರವು ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ರಾಜ್ಯವನ್ನು ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಭಾಷೆಯವರು ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆ ನಡೆಸುವಂತಾಗಬಾರದು ಎಂಬ ಅಂತರ್ಗತ ಎಚ್ಚರವು ಅಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಈ ಎಚ್ಚರವು ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಎಚ್ಚರಿಕೆ ಈಗ ಯಾಕೋ ಎಚ್ಚರಿಕೆ ಗಂಟೆ ಬಡಿದುಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತಿದೆ, ಅದರ ಸದ್ದು ಕೇಳಿಸುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ ತಂದುಕೊಟ್ಟವರು ಹಾಗೂ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದ ರಚಿಸಿದವರಿಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ದುಸ್ವಪ್ನ ಬಿದ್ದೆ? ಹೌದು, ಭಾಷೆ ಎಲ್ಲೆಯನ್ನು ಉಲ್ಲಂಘಿಸಿ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆಗೆ ಅನುಗುಣವಾಗಿ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸ್ಥಾನಗಳನ್ನು ನಿಗದಿಪಡಿಸಿದರೆ ಭಾರತ ಎನ್ನುವ ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆಗೆ ಇದು ದುಸ್ವಪ್ನ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ಗಾಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ತೇಲಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆಗೆ ಅನುಗುಣವಾಗಿ 888 ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ಆಯ್ಕೆ ಆಗೋದಾದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತದೆ? ಈಗ 500 ಚಿಲ್ಲರೆ ಇದ್ದೇ ಲೋಕಸಭೆಯ ಗದ್ದಲ ತಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಗದ್ದಲ ಡಬಲ್ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು ಅಷ್ಟನೇ. ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅದರಿಂದ? ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಒಂದು ನೋಡೋಣ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಜವಾದ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮೆಂಬರ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ? ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯ ಸಂವಾದ ಇವನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಬಿಜೆಪಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮೆಂಬರ್ ಇರೋದು, ಇನ್ನುಳಿದವೆಲ್ಲ ಜೈ ಹೌದಲ್ವಾ? ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ 1-2-3 ಜನ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಭಿನ್ನಮತ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಹಾಗೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ 2-3 ಪಕ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ 1-2-3 ಜನ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಜನ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಬರೋದು. ಉಳಿದಿರೋವೆಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮಂದೇ ರೀತಿ ವರ್ತಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ 888 ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾ? ಶಬ್ದಗಳನ್ನ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್, ನಮ್ಮ ಶಬ್ದ ಮಾಲಿನ್ಯವನ್ನು ನಮ್ಮ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾ? ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಆಯ್ತು, ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆಗೆ ಅನುಗುಣವಾಗಿ 888 ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ಆಯ್ಕೆ ಆಗುವುದಾದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ಕೇವಲ 3 ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಹಿಂದಿ ಭಾಷೆಯ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಷ್ಟೇ ಕೂಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಕೇಂದ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹುಮತ ಗಳಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲೂಬಹುದು. ಈ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಉಂಟಾಗೋದನ್ನ ಊಹಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ಕಷ್ಟ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಆಗ ಹಿಂದಿ ಭಾಷೆಯು ಭಾರತದ ಉಳಿದೆಲ್ಲ ಶ್ರೀಮಂತ ಭಾಷೆಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಸವಾರಿ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಏನೋ ಮಾಡೇ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಹಿಂದಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶದ ಉತ್ತರ ಭಾರತವು ಕೇಂದ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹುಮತ ಪಡೆದು ಇಡೀ ಭಾರತವನ್ನು ಆಳ್ಕೆ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಆಗ ದಕ್ಷಿಣ ಆ ಕಡೆ ಈ ಕಡೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೊರಟೋಯ್ತು. ಒಂದು ಸೆಂಟ್ರಲ್ 3 ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ರಾಜ್ಯ. ಈ ಆಳ್ವಿಕೆಗೆ ಭಾರತದ ಇತರ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳು ಸಾಮಂತ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಾಗಿ ಬಿಡುತ್ತವೆ. ಸಾಮಂತ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಾದವು ತಮ್ಮ ಹಲ್ಲು ಉಗುರುಗಳನ್ನು ಕಳೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಬಿಡುತ್ತವೆ. ಉತ್ತರದ ಹಿಂದಿ ಚಕ್ರವರ್ತಿಗೆ ಕಪ್ಪ ಒಪ್ಪಿಸುತ್ತಿರಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತದೆ. ಆಗ ಭಾರತವು ಭಾರತವಾಗಿ ಉಳಿದಿರುವುದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಎಚ್ಚರಿಕೆ ಗಂಟೆ ಬಡಿದುಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ, ಒಂದು ಮೌಲ್ಯ, ಒಂದು ಓಟು, ಈ ಮೌಲ್ಯ ಕಡೆಗಣಿಸಬೇಕೆ? ವಯಸ್ಕ ಮತದಾನ ಬೇಕೇ ಬೇಡವೇ ಎಂಬ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಮಹತ್ವದ ಮೌಲ್ಯ, ಖಂಡಿತ ಕಡೆಗಣಿಸಬಾರದು. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇನ್ನು ಅದು ಕಡೆಗಣಿಸಬಾರ್ದು. ಅದನ್ನ ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ, ಇದೊಂದಕ್ಕಂತಲ್ಲ, ಕಡೆಗಣಿಸಬಾರ್ದು ಅದನ್ನ. ಆರ್ಥಿಕವಾಗಿ, ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕವಾಗಿ, ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ, ಒಂದು ಮೌಲ್ಯ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಗಂಟ ನಾವು ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು, ನಿಜ. ಆದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿರುವ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ ದೇಶವೊಂದರ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಪ್ರಾತಿನಿಧ್ಯದ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ. ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿದಾವೆ, ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಪ್ರಾತಿನಿಧ್ಯದ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿರೋದು, ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಆಯ್ತಪ್ಪ. ಈಗ ಅಮೆರಿಕದ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ, ಅದರಲ್ಲೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಯುವ ಜನತೆ ಸಂಭ್ರಮಿಸುತ್ತಾರೆ. ನಾನು ಕೊಡ್ತಿರೋ ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ದೂರ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅಡ್ವೊಕೇಟ್ ತರ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಿ, ಆದ್ರೂ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸಹಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ದಾರಿ ಕಾಣ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋ ಆಸೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಸಂಭವಿಸುತ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಮೆರಿಕಾದ ಸೆನೆಟರ್ ಆಯ್ಕೆ ಗಮನಿಸುವುದಾದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರತಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೂ 2 ಸೆನೆಟರ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ನಿಗದಿಪಡಿಸಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಸೆನೆಟರ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಗದಿಪಡಿಸಲಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆನೆಟರ್ಸ್ ನ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಗದಿಪಡಿಸಿಲ್ಲ, ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಗದಿಪಡಿಸಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ 2 ಸೆನೆಟರ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಮುಖ್ಯ. ಇದು ರಾಡಿಕಲ್ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ. ಒಂದು ದೇಶದ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟದಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳು ಉಳಿಯಬೇಕಾದರೆ ಇಂತಹ ವಿವೇಚನೆಗಳು ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತದೆ. ನಮ್ಮದೇ ಬೇರೆ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್, ಅವ್ರದೇ ಬೇರೆ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್, ಅದು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡೋಣ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಟ್ ಏನು, ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಆಧಾರ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಅದಷ್ಟು ಮಾತ್ರ ತಂದಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಾನು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನೋಡೋಣ, ಬೇರೆ ಹುಡ್ಕೋಣ. ಅಮೆರಿಕದಂತಹ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆಗಳು ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇರುವ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲೇ ಇಂತಹ ಗೌರವದ ನಡೆ, ರೆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟ್ಫುಲ್ ನಡೆ ಇರುವಾಗ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆಗಳಿಂದ ತುಂಬಿ ತುಳುಕುತ್ತಿರುವ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾಕಿರಬಾರ್ದು? ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಬೇಗ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಈಗಿರುವ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ನಡುವಿನ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ಅನುಪಾತವನ್ನು 1:2 ಏನೋ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಅನುಪಾತ, ಈಗ ಇರೋ ಪ್ರಮಾಣ ಅನುಪಾತದ ಆಧಾರವನ್ನು ಆಧರಿಸಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾದರೂ ಆಗಲಿ, ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿದ್ರೂ ಆಗಲಿ, ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಆಗೋದನ್ನೇ ನಾನು ಅಪೇಕ್ಷೆ ಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಈ ಅನುಪಾತದ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆಯನ್ನು ನಿರ್ಧರಿಸುವುದು ಕ್ಷೇಮಕರ. ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾಡುವುದು ಭಾರತವು ಭಾರತವಾಗಿ ಉಳಿಯಲು ಅನಿವಾರ್ಯ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
ಒಂದು ವಿಶೇಷ ಸವಲತ್ತು, ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ. ಅದೇ ಟ್ರೈನ್ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ.
ಸಭಾಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಾದ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ವೆಂಕಟರಾಮಯ್ಯನವರೇ,
ವೇದಿಕೆ ಮೇಲಿರುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗಣ್ಯರೇ, ವೇದಿಕೆಯ ಮುಂದೆ ಇರುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಸೈಂಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಹಾಗೂ ಇತರ ಗಣ್ಯರೇ, ಸಭಿಕರೇ, ಪತ್ರಕರ್ತ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಮೈಸೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಕ್ಕೆ, ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ BR ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಸಂಶೋಧನಾ ಹಾಗೂ ವಿಸ್ತರಣಾ ಕೇಂದ್ರ ಹಾಗೂ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಪೀಠ, ಅವೆಲ್ಲಕ್ಕಿಂತಲೂ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ಪಾಲಿಟಿ ಫೋರಂ, ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ VK ನಟರಾಜ್ ಅವರು, ಇವುಗಳ ಪರವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ, ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅವರೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಇಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯಬೇಕಾದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಚರ್ಚೆಯನ್ನು ಮೈಸೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಈ ಪುಟ್ಟ ಕೋಣೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬು ಹೃದಯದ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳು. ಬಹುಶಃ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದ ಯಾವ ಭಾಗದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಇಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಇದುವರೆಗೆ ನಡೆದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದರಲ್ಲೂ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಡಿಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು, ನಡೆದಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಕಮಿಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಡಿಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಮೈಸೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಚ್ಛೆ ಪಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ವಿಚಾರಗಳು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ನನಗೆ ಕೇವಲ 6 ನಿಮಿಷ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಸಭಾಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ದೇವನೂರು ಮಾದೇವ್ ಅವರು ನಂದು ಬಹುಶಃ 10 ನಿಮಿಷ ತಗೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಂಗಾಗಿ ನಾನು -4 minutes ಅದರಿಂದ ಬರೀ ಬುಲೆಟ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಶನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಬರೀ ಬುಲೆಟ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ, ವಿವರವಾಗಿ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ತಾತ್ವಿಕವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಕೆಲವು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಐ ವಿಶ್ ದಿಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ಬೀನ್ ದಿ ಕೀನೋಟ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಶನ್. 4 ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡುವ ವಿಚಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಾಗೆ 4 ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಭಾರತದ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಭದ್ರವಾಗಿ ಅಡಕ ಮಾಡಲಾಗಿದೆ. ನಂಬರ್ 1, ಅಡಲ್ಟ್ ಫ್ರಾಂಚೈಸ್, ವಯಸ್ಕರ ಮತದಾನ. ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬ ನಾಗರಿಕನಿಗೂ ಒಂದು ಮತ, ಆ ಒಂದು ಮತಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದೇ ಮೌಲ್ಯ. ಇದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ. ಆ ಒಂದು ಮತಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದೇ ಮೌಲ್ಯ. ಈ ಒಂದು ತಳಹದಿಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಭಾರತದ ಪ್ರಜಾತಂತ್ರವನ್ನ ಕಟ್ಟಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಪೂರಕವಾದ 2ನೆಯ ತಂತ್ರ ಪರಿಚ್ಛೇದ 81ರಲ್ಲಿ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ 81 ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆಯ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಿರ್ಧಾರ ಮಾಡಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ವಿಚಾರ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ತಿಳಿಸಲಾಗಿದೆ. ನಾವು ಬಹಳ ಹಿಂದಿನ ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಲೇಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ನಾನು ಚರಿತ್ರೆಗೆಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಚ್ಛೆ ಪಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಆಸ್ ಅನ್ ನಾವು 1971ರ ಜನಗಣತಿಯ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಷ್ಕರ್ಷೆ ಆಗಿರೋದು 543 ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರಿರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಅದನ್ನ 81ನೇ ಪರಿಚ್ಛೇದದಲ್ಲಿ ತೀರ್ಮಾನ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ 81ನೇ ಪರಿಚ್ಛೇದ 2 ಸೂತ್ರಗಳನ್ನ ಅನ್ವಯ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಇದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ. ಮೊದಲನೆಯ ಸೂತ್ರ ಏನಪ್ಪಾ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಡೀ ಭಾರತದಾದ್ಯಂತ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಕೊಡುವ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಎಷ್ಟಪ್ಪ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಮತ್ತು ಆ ಸದಸ್ಯತ್ವದ ಪ್ರಪೋರ್ಷನ್ ಏನಿದೆ, ದಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಯೂನಿಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಥ್ರೂಔಟ್ ದಿ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ 1 man 1 vote, 1 vote 1 value ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ತತ್ವ ಏನಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಸಾಕ್ಷಾತ್ಕಾರ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಜಮ್ಮು ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರದಲ್ಲಾಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ಪಂಜಾಬ್ನಲ್ಲಾಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಾಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ಒಂದು ಮತ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಮೌಲ್ಯ ಇದೆಯೋ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅದೊಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಾಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದಾದ್ರೆ, ಜಮ್ಮು ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ 10,000 ಜನಗಳಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮೆಂಬರ್ ಅಂತ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಇರುವ ಉತ್ತರ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ 25 ಲಕ್ಷ ಜನಗಳಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಸದಸ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಜಮ್ಮು ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರದ ಮತದಾನನ ಮೌಲ್ಯ ಸುಮಾರು 250 ಪಟ್ಟು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಉತ್ತರ ಪ್ರದೇಶದ ಮತದಾರನಿಗಿನ್ನ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಇಲ್ಲ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಲ್ ಸಫರೇಜ್. ವಯಸ್ಕರ ಮತದಾನ ಅದಲ್ಲ. ಪ್ರಜಾತಂತ್ರದ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಭೂಮಿಕೆ ಮತದಾರರಿಗೆ ಒಂದೇ ಮತ, ಆ ಮತಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದೇ ಮೌಲ್ಯ. ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿರ್ಬೋದು, KR ನಾರಾಯಣನ್ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಿದ್ದಾಗ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಪತಿ ಭವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಮತದಾನಕ್ಕೆ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಪತಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಅನುಕೂಲಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಅಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಮತದಾನದ ಕಟ್ಟೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಆ ಮತದಾನದ ಕಟ್ಟೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಪತಿ ಭವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸೇವಕರಿಗೆ ಅದೊಂದು ಮತಗಟ್ಟೆಯನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಟಿದ್ರು. KR ನಾರಾಯಣನ್ ಹೋದಾಗ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ದಾರಿ ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಅವರು ನೀವು ನಿಂತಲ್ಲೇ ಇರಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವರು ಸಾಲಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಸರದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತು ಸರದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಮತ ಹಾಕಿ ಹೋದ್ರು. ಅದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ಅವರು ಸಾಕ್ಷಾತ್ಕಾರ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ವಿಚಾರ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನನಗೂ ಒಂದೇ ಮತ, ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಪತಿ ಭವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಸ ಗುಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರೋನ್ಗೂ ಇರೋದು ಒಂದೇ ಮತ, ನಮ್ಮಿಬ್ಬರ ಮತಕ್ಕೂ ಒಂದೇ ಮೌಲ್ಯ, ನಾವು ಸರದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಮತವನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಇದು ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್. ನಾನು ಜಯಚಾಮರಾಜ ಒಡೆಯರು ವೋಟ್ ಕೊಡುವಾಗ ಅವ್ರ ಫೋಟೋ ಬರ್ತಿತ್ತು, ಶ್ರೀಕಂಠದತ್ತ ಒಡೆಯರು ಕೊಡುವಾಗ ಅವ್ರ ಫೋಟೋ ಬರ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಮಹಾರಾಜರು ಮತಕ್ಕೂ ಒಂದೇ ಮತ, ಶ್ರೀಸಾಮಾನ್ಯನಾದ ನನಗೂ ಒಂದೇ ಮತ, ಇದು ನಮ್ಮಿಬ್ಬರದು ಒಂದೇ ಮೌಲ್ಯ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಪ್ರಜಾತಂತ್ರವನ್ನು ಸೆಲೆಬ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ದಿ ಕನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್. ಸೊ 543 ಸೀಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೆ ಕೊಡೋದು, ಉತ್ತರ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಕೊಡೋದು, ಅದು ಎರಡೂನು ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಮತ್ತು ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೀಟ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರಪೋರ್ಷನ್ ಏನಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಇಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಯೂನಿಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಥ್ರೂಔಟ್ ದಿ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ. ಇದು ಮೊದಲನೆಯ ಸೂತ್ರ. ಎರಡನೆಯ ಸೂತ್ರ, ಆ ಬೇಸಿಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಇದನ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ಸಾರಿ, ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಆಯ್ತು. ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ರಫೀಕ್ ಅವರು ಬಹಳ ಪ್ಯಾಷನೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಇಂಡಿಯಾನ ಈಸ್ಟ್ ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ನಾರ್ತ್ ಸೌತ್ ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಕ್ರಾಸ್ ದಿ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ದಿ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟರಿ ಸೀಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ. ಸರ್, ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂವಿಧಾನಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊರತಾದಂತ ವಿಚಾರ, ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಚೌಕಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಬರದೇ ಇರುವಂತ ವಿಚಾರ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂವಿಧಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಡಕ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ, ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಸೀಮಿತವಾದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಜಾತಂತ್ರ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಸದಸ್ಯರನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆಯೋ ಅಷ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ಇದು ಅಕ್ರಾಸ್ ದಿ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್ ಇರುವಂತ ಪ್ರಪೋರ್ಷನ್ ವಿಚ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಸೇಮ್ ಥ್ರೂ ಔಟ್ ದಿ ಕಂಟ್ರಿ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸೂತ್ರ, ಆ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇರಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಸೂತ್ರ ಅದೇನು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, that should be again proportionately equal in all the constituencies. The population and the number of seats proportion should be the same. In other words, within the state and across the states, the value of one vote, one value is preserved. So idu nammali irtakkantaddu ಕೊನೆಯ ತತ್ವ. ನಾಲ್ಕನೇದು, ಈ ಒಂದು ನಿಷ್ಕರ್ಷೆ ಮಾಡಿದಂತಹ ಪ್ರಜಾತಂತ್ರದ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ, ಪ್ರತಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಲೋಕಸಭಾ ಸದಸ್ಯರ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ, ಇದನ್ನ ಪ್ರತಿ ಸಲ ಜನಗಣತಿಯಾದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅದನ್ನ ರೀಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ಆ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಡಿಲಿಮಿಟೇಷನ್ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಮಾಹಿತಿಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಚ್ಛೆ ಪಡೋದು, ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಜನಗಣತಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಈ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದ ಆಶಾಕಿರಣ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಮೊಟ್ಟ ಮೊದಲ ಜನಗಣತಿ ನಡೆದದ್ದು 1872ನೇ ಇಸ್ವಿಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಆಗ ಮೈಸೂರು ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು, ರೆವಿನ್ಯೂ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು, PWD ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದೇ ಕೋಮಿನ ಜನ ಇದ್ರು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಮೈಸೂರು ಸಂಸ್ಥಾನದ ನಂಬಿಕೆ ಏನಪ್ಪಾ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಮೈಸೂರು ಸಂಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹುಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರು ಇರೋದೇ ಈ ಕೋಮ್ನವರು ಅಂತ. 1872ರಲ್ಲಿ ಜನಗಣತಿ ನಡೆದಾಗ ಈ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯ ತಪ್ಪು. ಈ ಕೋಮ್ನವ್ರು ಇರೋದು 3%. ಬಹುಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರಿಗೆ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಅಧಿಕಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಪಾಲು ಸಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ, ಅಧಿಕಾರ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ, ಅಸಿಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಕಮಿಷನರ್ಗಳಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ರಿಸರ್ವೇಶನ್ ಕೇಮ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಫೋರ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಹೋಲ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್. ಕೈಂಡ್ಲಿ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ ಇಟ್. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಥ್ರೂ ಅಪ್ ದಿ ಡೇಟಾ. ಇವತ್ತು ಯಾಕೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ಹಿಂಜರಿತಾ ಇದೆ? ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಸತ್ಯ ಹೊರಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತೋ ಅಂತ ಬಚ್ಚಿಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ದಿ ನ್ಯೂ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಥೆಫ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ನಾಲೆಡ್ಜ್. ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ತಾನೇ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಿಕ್ಬಿಡೋದು. ಫಸ್ಟು ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ ಅಂತ 51ರಿಂದ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರ ಭಾರತದ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ನಿರ್ಣಯ. ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಅಧಿಕಾರ ಬಂತು ಅಂತ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾರು 1874ರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರ ಬಂಡವಾಳ ಹೊರಗೆ ಬಿತ್ತೋ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಈ ಮಾಹಿತಿಯನ್ನ ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಚ್ಛೆ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಂಗಾಗಿ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಐ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಸ್ಟ್ರೆಸ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ದಟ್ ಜನಗಣತಿ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ವಿಚಾರ. ಇಲ್ಲದಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ರಿಸರ್ವೇಶನ್ನೇ ಬರ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ 1874 ಮೈಸೂರು ಸಂಸ್ಥಾನ ಮೊಟ್ಟ ಮೊದಲ ಮೀಸಲಾತಿಯನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಸಂಸ್ಥಾನ. ಅದು ಏನು? ಬರೀ ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಇಲಾಖೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ, ಬರೀ ಹೆಡ್ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟೇಬಲ್, ಸಬ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟರ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹುದ್ದೆಗಳನ್ನ ಮೀಸಲಿಟ್ಟು. ಅದೇನು 10 ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರಿಗೆ, ಇನ್ 8 ಮುಸಲ್ಮಾನರು ಮತ್ತು ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣೇತರ ಹಿಂದೂಗಳಿಗೆ ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು. ಇದನ್ನ ದಿವಾನ್ ಮಾಧವರಾವ್ ಇದ್ದಾಗ 1885ರಲ್ಲಿ ರಿವ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಮುಂದುವರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ನಂತರ ಮೈಸೂರು ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರು ಏನಿದು ಬರೀ ಮಡ್ರಾಸ್ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರನ್ನ ಅಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರು. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ದಿವಾನ್ರೆಲ್ಲ ಮಡ್ರಾಸ್ ಇಂದ ಬರ್ತಿದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ಗಳು, ಎಂಜಿನಿಯರ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಂದು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಬರೀ ಮಡ್ರಾಸ್ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಿ ಅಂತ. ಅದರ ಮೊದಲ ಫಲಾನುಭವಿ ಸರ್ ಎಂ ವಿಶ್ವೇಶ್ವರಯ್ಯ ದಿವಾನ್ರಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲಿಂದ ನೀವು ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ನ್ಯಾಯ ಹೇಳಿದವರು ಬರೀ ಮೈಸೂರು ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರಿಗೆ ಯಾಕೆ, ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣೇತರರಿಗೆ ಯಾಕೆ ಬೇಡ? ಬಸವಯ್ಯ ಲಿಂಗಾಯತರ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ನಾಯಕ, MC ಲಿಂಗೇಗೌಡ ಒಕ್ಕಲಿಗರ ನಾಯಕ, ಈ ತರ 3-4 ಜನ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣೇತರ ನಾಯಕರು ಇದನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಮಿಲ್ಲರ್ ಆಯೋಗ, ಆ ನಂತರ ಒಂದು ವೈಜ್ಞಾನಿಕವಾಗಿ ಮೀಸಲಾತಿಯನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮಿಲ್ಲರ್ ಆಯೋಗದ ಆ ವರದಿಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಬಂತು. ಸೊ ಹೀಗೆ ಜನಗಣತಿಯ ಪ್ರಾಮುಖ್ಯತೆಯನ್ನು ಕಂಡಿದ್ರಿಂದ ಪ್ರತಿ ಸಲ ಜನಗಣತಿ ಆದ ಕೂಡಲೇ ರಿವೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ರೀಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಡಿಲಿಮಿಟೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಯನ್ಸೀಸ್ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದಿ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್, ಡಿಲಿಮಿಟೇಷನ್. ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಯಾರೋ ಮೆನ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಗೆರ್ರಿ ಮ್ಯಾಂಡ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತ. 200 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ನಡೆದಂತ ಘಟನೆ. ಅಮೆರಿಕ ಸಂಯುಕ್ತ ಸಂಸ್ಥಾನಗಳ ವೈಸ್ ಪ್ರೆಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರು ಆಲ್ಬ್ರಿಡ್ಜ್ ಗೆರ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು. ಅವರು ಮೆಸಾಚುಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಗವರ್ನರ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾಗ he had the power of delimiting the constituencies. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಹೊಳೆ ನರಸೀಪುರಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಆ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂನ್ಸಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಎ ಸರ್ಕಲ್, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಎ ಟ್ರಯಾಂಗಲ್, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಎ ರೆಕ್ಟಾಂಗಲ್. ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಹಾವಿನ ತರ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಹರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿ ಇದನ್ನ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂನ್ಸಿ ಡಿಲಿಮಿಟೇಷನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅದೇ ತರ 700 ಒಬ್ಬ ಬಲಿಷ್ಠ ನಾಯಕನನ್ನ ಬಲಿ ಹಾಕ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆ 700 ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂನ್ಸಿನೇ ಡಿಸಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಯ್ತು. ಜಯಚಂದ್ರನ್ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಅವ್ರ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂನ್ಸಿ ಡಿಸಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಯ್ತು. ಈ ತರ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಗೆರ್ರಿ ಮ್ಯಾಂಡ್ರನ್ನ ಮೀರ್ಸೋ ಅಂತ ಮ್ಯಾಂಡ್ರಿಂಗ್ ನಡೆದು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯವನ್ನ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಐ ಸಂದೀಪ್ ಶಾಸ್ತ್ರಿ ಅವರ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯವನ್ನು ನಾನು ಬಲವಾಗಿ ಅನುಮೋದಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ದಿ ಡಿಲಿಮಿಟೇಷನ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೀಡಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಪೆರೆಂಟ್. delimitation should be accountable. And delimitation report should be provisional, thrown open for debate, and only after public debate, its acceptance or final recommendation should go. I would go a step further. On limited grounds, it should be justiciable also. Why should it not be justiciable? I can demonstrate how more than gerrymandering, Devagowda mandering has taken place in Karnataka because he was a member of the committee. I can demonstrate. So it has gone unchallenged. Entire constituencies have been wiped out. Now this should not happen. So delimitation and kudle ನೀವು don't take it on its face value. It has its own hidden agendas. So ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸರಿಪಡಿಸಬೇಕು. ಸೊ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ನನಗೆ ಎಚ್ಚರಿಕೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ರಿಂದ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಇನ್ನ ಬಹಳ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರು ದೇವನೂರು ಮಾದೇವ್ ಅವರು. ಬಿಜೆಪಿಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಒಬ್ನೇ ಸಂಸತ್ ಸದಸ್ಯ ಅಂತ. ಯಾಕದು ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆಂಟಿ ಡಿಫೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಲಾ ಬಂತು. ಬೈ ಆಡಿಂಗ್ 10th ಶೆಡ್ಯೂಲ್ ಟು ದಿ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂದೆಂದೂ ಇಲ್ಲದೇ ಇದ್ದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಅಧಿಕಾರವನ್ನ ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಪಕ್ಷಗಳಿಗೆ ಕೊಡಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಒಂದು ಪಕ್ಷ ನಿರ್ಧಾರ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, ಈತ ನನ್ನ ಪಕ್ಷದ ಸದಸ್ಯನಾಗಿ ಮುಂದುವರಿಬೇಕೋ ಅಥವಾ ಅವನು ಆಂಟಿ ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ಗೆ ಅವನನ್ನ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಲ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ವಿಲ್ ಲೂಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಮೆಂಬರ್ಶಿಪ್. ಅವನು ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಆಡಿದ ಭಾಷಣ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ನೀನು ಆಂಟಿ ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ he can be subjected to disqualification. Opposition party leader meet ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಸಾಕು, he can be expelled, and that can be the subject matter of disqualification. More than anything else, on the floor of the house, the freedom of a parliament member has been totally destroyed. ಇವತ್ತು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಸದಸ್ಯನಿಗೆ ಅಭಿವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯವಿಲ್ಲ. ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ದಿ ಹೈಯೆಸ್ಟ್ ಫಾರಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ಅನ್ಲಿಮಿಟೆಡ್ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಫ್ಲೋರ್ ಆಫ್ ಎ ಹೌಸ್. Now today a parliament member is an emasculated mouse, not a lion, roaring lion as we used to see, because he is under the clutches. So can you imagine Mallikarjun Kharge going and voting in favor of economically weaker sections? Baba Saheb Ambedkar must be turning in the grave. ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರಿಗೆ ಮೀಸಲಾತಿ ಕೊಡುವಂತಹ EWSಗೆ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಮೀಸಲಾತಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗಿ ವೋಟ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ. ಬಟ್ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಅಂಡರ್ ದಿ ಥಂಬ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟಿ. And all political parties across, we are discussing so many things, whether it is Hindi speaking North or non-Hindi speaking South. If it is a national party that is elected to power in the center, I am convinced that there will be no qualitative change in our democratic setup, either want of democracy or its progress will be the same, be it in the hands of BJP or in the hands of Congress, because both have ruled with an iron hand. And after all, BJP is only following the rich tradition Congress had unveiled in this country in its rule. So ಇದು ಇಷ್ಟು. ಈಗ ನನಗೆ ಇದನ್ನು ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಮಾತು ಹೇಳಿ ನನ್ನ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. The fundamental principle of our democracy is accountability. That a government is accountable to the people. It is a government by the people, for the people, of the people. So it has to be accountable every minute. Now, how do you materialize that accountability? Through our representatives elected to the parliament. Now, every parliament member is given what are known as MPLADs, member of parliament, local area development fund. Now, a person who is elected by us to frame the laws for the country and to hold the government accountable for any misdeeds or for misappropriation of money is now given crores of rupees in his pocket. Now, where do you get his accountability established? So MPLADs have destroyed the doctrine of accountability, which was manifested through our members, parliament members, both at the center and in the states. Due apologies to the political scientists. I thought political scientists will take it. Anti-defection law, which has emasculated our legislators and parliament members, and the MPLAD funds, which have made the sovereign parliament members mouses in the parliament because they are themselves accountable for the money they have taken and spent in their constituency. So with these submissions, now the expected rise will be about 300 more seats. How do you prevent a north-south divide or the oligarchy and non-oligarchy divide? I have a very humble suggestion for this house to consider. Now, these 300 seats, let us give it to those who have hitherto had no representation. The first stakeholder will be women of this country. They should get at least 1/3 of these 300 seats. In other words, give them at least 100 seats reservation. As to how you are going to delimit their constituencies, would it be a double member constituency, single member constituency? Will the women get double votes? You can take a decision. Second, give an equal number of 100 seats, because Baba Saheb Ambedkar thought in 10 years, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are going to be so powerful that a reservation may not be extended beyond 10 years. That has proved to be a myth. So give them 100 seats more on the basis of separate electorate. Let us test this principle, what Baba Saheb Ambedkar had said. Give them one vote, let them elect their true representatives. Give them the second vote, where in the joint electorate, they may elect reserved representatives. And the third, last but not the least, there is a mammoth population which remains unrepresented. ಆನೆಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೆಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಸಿಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಆನೆ ಯಾವ್ದಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ವರ್ಗಗಳು. ಈ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದ 60% ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ವರ್ಗಗಳಿಗೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯ ಪ್ರಾತಿನಿಧ್ಯ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ 60% ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಈ ಉಳಿಕೆ 100 ಸೀಟ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ನೀವು ರಿಸರ್ವೇಶನ್ ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೊಡಿ, ಸಪರೇಟ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟರೇಟ್ ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೊಡಿ, ಹೇಗಾದ್ರೂ ಕೊಡಿ. ಲೆಟ್ ಅಸ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ distributing this. Rest of it, north south divide, everything we can freeze it as it is. What I did not mention is 1971 basis ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ number of parliament members is frozen. 2001 census ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ within the state ಏನು distribution of constituencies ಇದೆ, that ratio is frozen. This will happen till 2031 census. ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಇದನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ 2031 ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ, that is $1 million question. Anyway, that will be decided. So with these suggestions, I thank the organizers and I profusely congratulate Mysore University and the other organizers for getting up this. Thank you.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಬಟ್ ಇದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಭಾಷೆಯನ್ನು ಕೊಲೆ ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದು. I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an economist. I'm not a lawyer. I am a mere historian. And I would like to take this opportunity to reflect in this conversation on something that has not come up in these 2 days. The talk has been about the state finances, delimitation, etc. But I would like to speak about the nation and what kind of concept of nation is possible. And here I'm confining myself to the Karnataka context, because I sense a different kind of asymmetry that is working in the concept of nation. And this is something I should acknowledge is now being recognized by many different kinds of historians and political scientists. Yesterday in his opening speech, Professor Mohan Gopal mentioned that one of the dangers of this new regime and its proposal for expanding the size of the parliament is that the specific identities of states, this kind of unitary government is going to wipe away the specific identities of states. He did not elaborate on this, and nobody has actually talked about this except indirectly. We just heard Professor Ravivar Makmar refer to Mysore's reservation policy. So it has come up indirectly, but we need to take seriously what is this culture of the state that needs to be protected, or rather I should say the culture of this region nation. If we look at the history, I want to assure Manya Adakshare, I will take no more than 6 minutes. When the linguistic states resolution was made in 1920 in Nagpur, remember, Karnataka did not exist as a nation, as a state. It was only in the imagination. There was only Mysore. But it was imagined that language would become the basis on which you reimagine regional nationhoods and political formations. That was the aspiration of that resolution. How has it been in different parts of India? When we think of other linguistic regions, for example, Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh, there were very strong bases rooted in language, cultural resources, which were rooted in very contemporary kinds of questions. So you had in the Tamil region, the very strong non-Brahmin or Dravidian movement. In Andhra Pradesh and Kerala, you had an emerging socialist movement. Yesterday, we had a good sense of the legacies of that socialist movement for decentralization and the robustness of decentralization in Kerala today. That's part of that legacy of the entire 20th century. These are regions which had very strong library movements. In the previous talk, Ganesh Prasad had referred to libraries being rejuvenated by being given to local bodies. But I would like to ask, what is the kind of literature that will be distributed in these libraries? It's a matter of concern to us, because libraries can, circulate all kinds of books, and we know the direction in which the control of libraries is going nationally. But in the historical case that I'm referring to, Andhra Pradesh and Kerala in particular, you had the pressures that were generated by an emerging socialist movement, which made these libraries and these kinds of resources the basis of a linguistic identity, which these states are heir to even today. Something like this has not happened in Karnataka. So I'm actually pointing today to something like a lack, something that is a gap. I was interested in listening yesterday and today to the many references to Karnataka's past. Invariably, we go back to Basavana. Even Gopal Guru, who is no longer here today, but he spoke about Jyotiba Phule and he spoke about Ambedkar and he spoke about Periyar. But for Karnataka, he said Basavana. As if since the 12th century, actually nothing has happened. We are harking back. So there is something there, these days we hear a lot about Shishnal Sharif. We hear, of course, much about Kuvempu, which are literary rather than social metaphors. I want to say that this extremely rich language, an extremely old language, this extremely old state, we have material evidence from the dolmens right up to the 21st century in a state like Karnataka, all within the borders of the state, has somehow not generated the kind of memory of nation in quite the same way that many other regions have generated. I mean, think about some of these texts. Ellaru odirbodu Alur avara Gatavaibhava, Karnatakada Gatavaibhava. Where does that book end? It ends with Vijayanagar. Or if you speak to the Lingayats, of course, they hark back to Basavana, and Basavana has become their hero. It is something to admire, the new unitary union government, that they are able to annex each and every symbol of each and every region to their unitary cause. So when Anubhava Mantapa was inaugurated, I don't know if you will remember, the advertisements used the phrase Pragati Para Sanatana, oxymoron, mutually contradictory, but nevertheless, they used that phrase. It was contested. It was contested, I would say, rather weakly by literatures. Many people, Bargur and others, had actually contested the use of that term. But by and large, the fact that the Lingayats have been cozy with the BJP, even in our state, shows that that heritage was not one that they thought was a cultural resource to resist this unitary and this, dominating power. Likewise, we have, the Dalits. We are actually, of course, extremely grateful to Buddha and Ambedkar, two figures, but we have a rich Dalit Sangharsh Samiti heritage here, which has not been invoked to produce this kind of nationhood. This morning we had a beautiful song which was sung praising the achievements of Nalvadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar, a song that celebrated his achievements. But let us remember, he was a monarch. How appropriate is that to our democracy? But all these examples, and one was expecting that in Devanur's book, Ala Mattu Agala of the RSS, although he points to the very important ways in which the RSS actually controls this national narrative, he does not give us the resources by which we have to actually counter this tsunami that is actually, flooding us all. How do we redraw? How can we redraw what I am calling a new social contract. How can we redraw a new social memory? I think this has begun following the 2023 victory. And I think this should be built on, because there is a window of hope here. But still, even in the Karnataka Madri kind of efforts that are being now made to try and build up an example of Karnataka, it is still the state that is at the center of this imagination. The state, its resources, its programs. We do not have rethinking about the nation, that is to say, about our nation. That is still, I would say, unaddressed. So I'm leaving you with a question. I'm not saying I have an answer. I'm just pointing out to you a lacuna, a gap. Around what can we build a new social memory? Around what? You know, we have all been hearing over the last year at least, but probably even longer, Kuvempu's song, Sarva Janangada Shantiya Tota, repeated as the one thing to which we are somehow clinging to say that this is the Karnataka that we need to rebuild. I would like to see some of the more recent achievements of the Karnataka region to be part of this new social memory, to be able to counter, as it were, and this countering of this, dominating, unifying, centralizing narrative is not going to happen through, or not only going to happen through the using alternative facts, fact correction. We say, okay, you got it wrong about this, that, or the other, and we're going to provide you with the actual factual truth. That somehow does not have, in our current situation, I believe, the same traction as a control of the narrative, which produces this kind of affect, an affective relationship with the people of Karnataka, to be able to convince them of the need to counter the kind of, as I said, force with which we are being steamrolled into homogenization, not just legally, but also otherwise. So, I think Vasavi gave us the example of Kudambashri, that there are many kinds of opportunities for rethinking even state programs imaginatively, to be able to recreate something that has been lost, but something which perhaps was not really there. So we have to create it anew. That's what I'm trying to suggest. And if I can take my few minutes here, I just want to end with one correction to what Sri Ravi Varma Kumar said. The demand of the women's movement is not for 100 seats. It is demand for 33% of all seats. It is the longest standing legislation bill that has not been passed. Please remember that's been almost 30 years that this bill has been pending. And I don't think the women's movement is going to accept anything less than a 33% reservation, which has worked so well in urban local bodies. Why should it not work at legislature and parliamentary levels? But that's just an aside. My main point here was trying to say that apart from the state and its financial, political, and economic kinds of engagements, we should also take the idea of the nation and the concept of Karnataka seriously enough to be able to build an alternative narrative. I leave that open to those of you who know better than me what the content of such a narrative should be. But I have merely spent my few minutes identifying what I believe is a serious lack, that unless we get into this idea of affect, we will not perhaps be able to turn the tide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I would like to start with thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity. I had a couple of points to make, but because of the paucity of time, I'll try to elaborate one of the points which I think is quite important, which has been discussed quite, vigorously in the last 2 days. And some implications of that I would like to talk about. And since I'm not a political scientist, I'm basically a statistician come economist. So the cobbler can only talk about his ladder. Okay, I'll just stick to certain bare facts or bare ideas. Now, at the heart, in some sense, of this particular problem that we have been discussing, that is the interstate asymmetry in terms of distribution of seats between, say, North and the South. I am using North and South in a broad general sense, okay, between North and the South, or between the Gangetic Plain states and the Southern states on the one hand, and the principle of one person, one vote, one value. Okay, I think there is a basic contradiction between these two values. Okay, there's a basic contradiction between these two values. Just look at the numbers. Even today, when the Gangetic Plain states, in fact, have a disproportionately larger number of seats, if you look at the value of vote in their states, if you take, say, the inverse of the size of the constituency as a rough indicator of the value of the state, they have a very low value. Okay, and if you try to correct the first problem, the problem in terms of distribution of seats in a more equitable fashion across, say, the Gangetic Plains and the southern states, that particular problem with respect to one person, one vote, one value will in fact aggravate. The variation will aggravate. So they work in two different directions. So ultimately, I think we will have to think of a via media, think of a balance. So how do you work out a balance? I think that is as I see it, that's the important question. No, I think, this is something I would like to point out. I don't think this point has been made. That is about, the value of votes in the Gangetic Plain states is very low compared to, say, the southern states. Okay. Now, it has very serious implications. That is because, for historical reasons, they have much higher levels of poverty today. 80% of the poor, measured by the standard measurement of poverty, would be concentrated in these highly backward states, whereas only about 20% of the poor will be in the southern states. Okay. Similarly, they have a much higher concentration of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. UP has high proportion of scheduled castes as well as Muslims. So also Bihar. And MP, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand have very high concentration of scheduled tribes. So the low value of votes for these particular states, in fact, reflects a very low value for these deprived communities. And that will get widened. So what do we do about it? Now, as I told you, you have to go in for some sort of balancing, some sort of via media. Now, many suggestions were made. Many suggestions were made by both in this session as well as in the previous session by Professor Sandeep Dixit. Now, I would like to slightly modify Professor Dixit's idea by bringing in another factor, which in fact we have been, Professor Nataraj and I have been discussing over the last 2 days. There is this feeling, in fact, even some of the questions raised in the morning, in fact, reinforced my this one view of it. There is this feeling that there is a population explosion in the northern states. That's not true. The available evidence very clearly shows that the total fertility rate, what the demographers use as a measure of fertility, is declining in every state in this country. It's declining in every state. It has declined to what we call the below replacement level, in the southern states. It should be somewhere around 2.1 for replacement of the population. In most of the southern states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra, it's less than 2.1. It's 1.7 in Kerala, 1.8 in. So, there is no possibility of their population going down considerably over the next few, decades or so. They'll get stabilized very soon. Now, the interesting thing is that for very many reasons, I don't want to get into the detailed reasons why it's happening. This type of decline in the total fertility rate, in fact, is happening all over the country, including UP and Bihar. Even though they don't have the same level of social sector development, education, healthcare, and things like that, as says in southern states. Fertility decline is taking place in these states. In fact, it's somewhere around 3 in UP today. Sooner or later, UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, if they continue at the same trend, okay, will have replacement level. So what I'm trying to say is that, it's just a question of time. Maybe 20 years, 30 years, the demographers are trying to work it out on the basis of data. The population in this country is going to stabilize. Okay. And all this talk about population explosion and things like that is grossly exaggerated. So population is going to stabilize everywhere, including in the northern states. Now, as it was pointed out, the number of seats and the distribution of seats is already frozen at 1971, sir? Pardon? 71 census. Now, the idea is that there will be a census. I hope there will be a census, okay? And a good census in 2031. And we should use that census to recalculate the whole thing, okay? And in the process, as Professor Sandeep Dixit pointed out, you can use certain techniques, like, for example, keeping the percentage distribution of the seats across states constant, but you take into account the new population data for 1931. Now, my suggestion is something like this. Just wait for 2 more decades. Just wait for 2 more decades. Wait for 2 more decades for a delimitation exercise. By 2051, the population will stabilize all over the country. Okay. And with this formula that was suggested by Professor Ravi Kumar or Professor Sandeep Dixit, using all of these adjustments in some sense, we can work out a via media in terms of balancing the 2 conflicting features, 2 conflicting factors which I had pointed out. Okay. So, in fact, that is my humble suggestion. You can wait. What's the whole idea? Why should you have to, going for delimitation in 2031? In fact, Home Minister will be very happy if you don't have to do a census even in 2031. Okay. So I think we can afford to wait for another 3 decades. And once the population stabilizes, do the exercise and then freeze it. Do the exercise, bringing in all the adjustments that have been suggested here. So it is possible, but the point is that even with that, okay, the value of vote in the northern states, in UP and Bihar, will be much less than the value of votes in, say, Kerala. Even with that, okay? So you cannot resolve this particular issue completely within itself. So you have to go outside of it. So I think the only way out is to widen and deepen your federalism. Okay. I don't want to, I'm not a political scientist. I have no expertise in this, but let me, again, one of the things that was suggested here, that was discussed, the Rajya Sabha is supposed to be the Council of States, and that's a joke. We all know that. It hardly works as a Council of States. Okay. It is a pale shadow of the Lok Sabha in terms of its composition. It has much smaller number of, members, and it has no role in government formation. Okay. It has next to no role even in terms of legislation. It has a role in terms of debate in which it excels. Okay. Now, why can't we have a Rajya Sabha which is much more empowered and whose composition reflects the interstate symmetry rather than asymmetry? Okay. And then it has a role in government formation. Money bills will be abolished. Okay. And then it has equal power in terms of legislation. Okay. Why can't we have something like this? This is just a wild idea, perhaps, but something I am throwing around. But it is a combination of, trying to balance the two conflicting, factors, which I pointed out earlier, on the one hand, and bringing in a genuine federal system. Okay, I think that is the only way out, ultimately. You can't solve that problem purely within that. You're trying to, completely resolve that conflict between the two, opposing factors. So I wanted to make a couple of other points, but because of time limitation, I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
So ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. I'm not going to discuss anything about delimitation because for the last 2 days we have been discussing about it and my knowledge is limited about delimitation. But I focus on the basic structure of our constitution, federalism, in the context of transfer of resources between Union and Karnataka particularly. Before that, a few things about the crisis our federation is confronting. Basic thing is constitutionally allocated distribution of power between Union and states as well as the local government is being destroyed and distracted in different ways. And it is observed that basically Indian Union is a unitary state with federal features and not a federal state with subsidiary unitary features. And this is going on basically for the reason that the present dispensation at the center has no belief in federalism, federal principles, because the mentor organization of this dispensation long ago has expressed their against federal principles. In one level, they say we are one country, one society, one nation, and hence it is natural that affairs of the union are governed through a single state of unitary state. Further, in a very venomous way, it is said, the mentor of the present government, union government, said, to buy deep for good all talk of federal structure of our country's constitution. One country, one state, one legislature, one executive, with no trace of fragmentational, regional, sectarian, linguistic, other types of pride being given a scope, playing havoc with the integrated harmony. They have used such words that how we are tolerating these things, I don't understand. He says, let the constitution be re-examined. This was said long ago in 1963. Let the constitution be re-examined, redrafted, so as to establish this unitary form of government. So this is the danger we are confronting. These unconstitutional, anti-federal, anti-linguistic ideas have not been contested or rejected by the union government. It is very important to note the words used by the mentor of this present government. Constitution be re-examined, redrafted, it be completely uprooted, constitution purified, to buy deep for good all talk of federal structure. With this prefatory remark, I come to the problem of transfer of resources and distortion of this constitutional principle of transfer of resources from the union to state. Number one, the Finance Commission, a constitutional body appointed once in 5 years by the president, recommends the principles of sharing the gross tax revenue of the union between the union and the state governments. Now, union government is required to transfer 41% of gross tax revenue of the union government to states, but it is not doing it. For example, in 23-24, gross tax revenue of the union government is 33.61 lakh crore. Actually, during 23-24, the transfer is 10.21 lakh crore, which comes to 30.38%. The loss to the state is about rupees 3.56 lakh crore. The union has to honor the recommendation of Finance Commission. This is one thing. Second one is distortion of not including revenue of cess and surcharges in the divisible pool. The union levies, collects and uses the revenue of two taxes, namely cess and surcharges. The revenue is not shared and is not added to the divisible pool. The revenue from these two accounted for 10.21% of gross tax revenue of the union government in 11 and 12. Now it has gone up to 28% in 23-24. So there is an Article 270 of our Constitution, which was amended in 2000, that prescribed that the revenue of these two taxes need not be shared with the states. If at all we want to uphold the values and the spirit of the Constitution and cooperative federalism, then the article concerned must be amended and revenue of these two taxes must be made part of devolution pool. Number three, distortion of the financial autonomy of the states by the introduction of GST. 15 Finance Commission stated that in the background of this statement of the finding of the 15 Finance Commission, that our Constitution by design assigned higher and more buoyant taxation and resources raising power to union. That is about 62.7% more power to union, whereas the burden of the expenditure comes, the states have to bear 62.4%. So in this background, my observation is now GST revenue is shared at 50%. So it can be raised between states and the union at 60 is to 40%. Lastly, but not least, federalism and economic development are closely related. The economic development of India is the sum total of the development of the states. Karnataka's NSDP accounts for 10.88% of nation's NDP in 2021. However, UP, which accounts for 16.49% of a nation's population, contributes only 9.39% to NDP. However, the union favors UP and other Hindi belt states in the transfer of resources. ದೇವನೂರು ಮಹಾದೇವ್ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದಾಗೆ ಹಿಂದುಳಿದ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಿಗೆ ಹಣಕಾಸು ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲಗಳನ್ನು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕೊಡುವುದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ವಿರೋಧ ಮಾಡುವ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದು ರಾಜ್ಯದೊಳಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದು ನಡಿಬೇಕು, ಇಂಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ನಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನಡಿಬೇಕು. ಆದರೆ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಯೂನಿಯನ್ ಗವರ್ನಮೆಂಟ್ ಕೊಡುವಂತ ಎರಡು ರೀತಿಯ ಹಣಕಾಸಿನ ವರ್ಗಾವಣೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಯೂನಿಯನ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಪಾಲು, ಪ್ರತಿ ವರ್ಷ ಬಜೆಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ಲಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಎರಡನೇದ್ದು, there is a thing called grants in aid. So there are many provisions through which union government can help backward states, not by doing injustice to Karnataka and southern states, especially with the transfer of resources. So there are many issues where federal structure is distorted, like NEET, Foreign Laws, Delhi Service Act 2023, NEP, and not consulting with states while taking decisions of national importance like demonetization or lockdown of COVID pandemic. So, and as 1973 Keshavananda Bharati case, it has clearly stated that federalism is the basic structure of our constitution. And that is being distorted, that is being destroyed. We have to raise our voice and for the protection of federalism, not because federalism is necessary for democracy, it is necessary for the survival of the nation. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. I would like to talk to you on this, how to approach the issue of delimitation. This is a part of the exercise that I have been doing along with my friend. The issue of delimitation in present context can be approached in two different ways. First is, in India, we decide on the number of constituencies, and then how those constituencies are distributed across states in terms of the proportion of population of the states. And then the size of the constituency is decided within each state. This is how we approach this whole issue of delimiting the geography of each of the constituencies. But literature on electoral studies show we'll have to first of all understand whether there can be an optimal constituency size. There is a classic paper in 1972 by Pera, which works on two important principles, that there are different groups in each constituency, and every group should have a fair amount of link with the representative. And thereafter, the representatives in the House of People should have links among themselves. So based on this theoretical idea, Pera goes about a cross-country study, and ultimately he prepared a mathematical model. I'm not getting into those details, but gave a simple formula that cube root of the population should be the size of the parliament. If you take 140 crore population, then we should have a size of population and parliament of about 1,120 seats. So this is one way in which we first decide on the size of the constituency and simultaneously the number of constituencies we require. There is another paper that came out in 2012, which talks about the square root of population as the basis to decide simultaneously the size of constituency as well as number of constituencies. But this particular study is based on smaller countries, and therefore it may not be applicable to a larger federal country like India. One thing is sure, that many of these studies also show over time, when the population of a country increases, no doubt the number of constituencies should also increase, but not proportionately. Because with modern technology, the effectiveness of communication between the people and the representative or among representative is improving. Therefore, the proportion in which population increase need not be matched by proportional increase in number of constituencies. So therefore, one can decide that 525 of the major states is not the number of constituencies that is adequate today. It has to be more than that. Two, if it is too large, like the cube root of population I said, about 1,120 seats, then each of these constituencies will be so small that itself would change the political plurality of each of these states. There is a Dueger law in electoral studies which says that there are only two effective parties in the first past post system of election. Whereas in India, with larger states like Uttar Pradesh, we have a Dueger index around 3. And in smaller state like Tamil Nadu, it is near 2. So when smaller constituencies come up in larger states, then to that extent, the political plurality will also come to the surface. But I do not know how politicians will deal with that. But that will be a reality to understand. So this is one part in which we approach the issue of delimitation as per electoral studies we get. Another way of looking at it is what we have been repeatedly hearing is one person, one vote. For about 100 years, this one person, one vote phrase has been discussed in the US courts. Repeatedly, this is being discussed and two different interpretations were given. One, whether one person, one vote means the population or the total number of residents in a region. If that is accepted, and because of the changing age structure of the population between constituencies, the effective number of voters would differ. Two constituencies may have the same population, but the two constituencies need not have the same number of voters. If that is the case, then the actual voters' value will differ. There may be a constituency with 1 lakh population. Because of the age structure, say it has more number of children, then it will have, say, about only 60% of that population being voters. Whereas there can be another constituency which has more number of old age person and less number of children, it will have more voters. So effectively, the value of the vote of these two different constituencies will differ. And this has been the case in the US for a very long time. And only in one ruling, they accepted the idea of one person, one vote, one value by voter as the basis. Whereas in most other cases, they decided on the basis of population. But still, the US court continued to engage this idea of interpreting one person, one vote differently over time. The third way in which this can be approached is called a grandfather class in the Canada. The grandfather classes, at the time of the Constitution, the constituencies have been distributed across provinces, and that would be frozen. Over time, the differences in population alone will be accommodated in terms of the extra constituencies that the provinces would get. So the proportion of the constituencies between a province where the population is more stagnant than the population of another province where it is growing faster, that proportion will not be growing faster as much as the population would be growing. So there are different experiences in which the distribution of seats are happening across various federations. The last clue, which actually I worked the mathematics of all this, I'm not giving you all that, but the last clue we get, I'm only giving you the concept. The last clue we get from the 15th Finance Commission, where the inverse of fertility rate is used as one of the criteria for distributing resources across states. So now I worked that if I use fertility as average fertility of states of 2011, and then use that since 1971, and project the population over the last 50 years, then the states which had lower fertility rate would gain a more number of seats than states which had higher fertility rate. So that is one way in which we accommodate the differences in fertility. All these things are very normative, but objective in terms of electoral studies theoretically, but all these things are quite normative when you come to practice all this and put into constitution. So when you have so many different ways of looking at delimitation exercises, and there are many more that are happening, we'll have to take a look around all this to make a very meaningful, objective approach towards the issue of delimitation without much of emotion around it. Thank you very much.
Good evening to you all. I'm here because I think I don't have any qualification to be on this dais because I'm a physicist and I think I represent the common person here. So as I understand this problem, so let me, and it was a fascinating talk, sir, yours, because I'm a theoretical physicist and your formula, I would like to look into it actually. It's cube root of population, fascinating. Yeah, how do you get that number, get that formula? Yes. So when I look at this problem, what struck me was asymmetry, the word asymmetry. And the greatest asymmetry is between the participation of women and men in all spheres of life. So if we address this asymmetry, we all know that the growth of population is inversely proportional to the empowerment of women. So when we address this asymmetry and empower women all over India, starting from today, because Major General Ambedkar was pointing out that we are talking about tomorrow, we are talking about our future, but we are not talking about today. So why don't we start doing it from today itself? Why don't we allocate resources irrespective of allocate resources to each and every corner of India to empower women? Let us allocate resources to education, access to healthcare, and various other, we know what it is. So I think even Devanur Mahadev would be very pleased with it, because he says that we should not differentiate between a person in Uttar Pradesh and a person in well-developed state. So as a woman and as somebody who sees this kind of asymmetry everywhere in all spheres, let us start doing it. And we have till 2031 to thrash out all these issues, whether it is cube root or square root. So from today itself, if we start from the present day itself, if we start doing this, probably we will end up with a stabilized population, a very well awareness in voters, because as we know, if you empower women, it's empowering the whole community. So my simple take is, it's we should start with empowering women first and foremost. Thank you very much.
I am the last batsman. So I won't risk repeating anything that has happened. When I joined Indian polity as an advocacy group, I myself am a senior citizen, but I was the youngest man in the group. That shows that there is still a lot of energy and enthusiasm in these people to express their concern and share it. We are talking about a demographic dividend in India, that India is young. But younger India is not addressing the issues of polity at all. So what do? We are talking about an event horizon of 10 years from now, what is going to happen, worrying about it. But the means, the steps we are going to take are extremely important. What are we going to do in the next 10 years? If the youth don't take up the issue, if they don't become active, all the nightmares that we are imagining is going to become true. So time to act is now. How do we do that? There is great need for advocacy and action. We are talking about holding our elected representatives accountable. When does that start? We are not in the habit of doing it. For example, hell a lot of money is spent in the name of solid waste management. We all agree that solid waste management is important, but we never question how it is being utilized. So in the name, just in front of our eyes, things keep happening. So it is time we start questioning, time we start holding our administration accountable. If you don't hold the local administration accountable, you can't talk about accountability at a higher level. So that question of accountability, holding them accountable, should start now. There is demand for good governance. It is not just fighting about corruption or anything. Every step, every money that is spent on your behalf, there is a legitimate demand for accountability. Unless we have accountability at these levels, we can't expect to hold accountability at a higher level. So let us take the first step. At one time, I think universities were the hotbed of political debates, political activism. Today, it's far removed from that. Youth are kept away from this polity. A lot of things have changed in the last 2 decades. One is the environmental realities are pushing us, and we are getting distracted in these issues and ignoring the actual things that are happening to us. Second, we are in a digital world and it's changing the face of way we do things. So instead of the technology adapting to us, we are adapting to the technology today. Let us take good advantage of that, put it to good use, and see that our resourcefulness is better. In 10 years, a lot of things are going to change. One thing that has to change is our complacency. Let's get active. Let's get the youth involved, and let there be strong advocacy groups which communicate this effectively. Otherwise, India is already getting divided in many ways. The only way to unite is with our common concern. Let's try that. Thank you very much.
Observations. Because observation. That is such representation of women is very important. And Madam was doubting whether sir has said about the 33%. Actually, what he said was that apart from 546, whatever extra 300 seats we have, out of them 100 should be given for I think that you are saying. That's what they are saying. And the other point is that you are telling about this coverage of population by 2000. I don't think that it's possible because at the rate of this growth rate of population, even at the rate of 1%, very difficult to maintain that. So if you see a particular rate, it's not possible to have this stabilization of population by 50 or 60. They're going to take 4 months. We are able to go to operation because we have to do it. For the API campus. And the presentation obviously based on the advancement in science and development and communication will bring down the number of subject suggest the criteria of very different Consider 18 plus population as the basis of the education. I worked out there is one such thing called as non-appropriate index, which means how the parliament constituency are distributed across the states. So there is a index for it. When I calculated for 2011 census, of course, it comes about 5.36%. That means about 28 seats have to be redistributed in their community from the south to the north to bring down that malappropriation index. Suppose if it is 18 plus voters as the basis of delimitation, then this index comes down to 3.26. I also worked out the actual number of voters exercise the franchise, that is voters turnout, then this index comes down to 2.31. If I use grandfather class at that of Canada, it was increases slightly to 2.98. And on grandfather class, if I use fertility rate, then once again it declines to 2.5. So this is how we understand how the denominator, namely the population in which the constituencies are delimited, that this denominator is changing, and to that extent, the malappropriation will also change. And that requires a level of political decision. It is not that, that's what I said, that based on these that we have and how we interpret the phrase of one person. The question made so far, I can't before that I corrected my
proposition and appropriated to 33 1/3. In fact, I gave 33 1/3 of the executives. Yes. No, the major hurdle of the bill because that the existing network not want to use the network. They do not want to allow rotation of their seats. So therefore, 300 seats are available. Now utilize this. I know that if all the 300 are given to the men provided, there is proportional representation. Even in favor of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, backward classes, and economically weaker sections. 100%, give it. I am for it. I want to put 50% if I may say so. I've given that opinion. And based on that, now Karnataka is giving 50% to local body. I argued and got the proposition of head in the court hall. So I want to put 50%. Why are you trying to 50? Let's put 50%. But start with this. Now 300 seats are available. Let all the 300 seats go to the time. And you have this new policy of getting it proportionately distributed among all the social sections. Let the minorities get their and to these seats and together all the minorities together will get 50%. The scheduled caste, scheduled tribes will get 22.5%, 23%. The backward class will get 60%. The rest will go to economic. Please do it, please. Let us start this debate. I think it is the most appropriate time under the leadership of Professor. So I appreciate the idea that I thought I'm prepared to go all hard and all the legitimate field and that can be done by practicing proportional representation or voting only on women, excluding women electoral college, even separate electorate scheduled caste. Let us try. Let us enrich our democracy by these. One observation I want to make. Nearly 70 years ago, but now in the 1950s, Dr. Ramanor Lohia made a very, very radical statement. To my thing, I sounded very radical at the speaking. He said all the political parties are controlled by them. So don't be carried away that this is the party that is doing. They are all one. Their mind speed. They have the same policy. Now, down 70 years, I think every word of what. So, if this is the state of affairs, we have to deal with the very concept of ruling party, opposition party, majority party, minority party. So, in South Africa, we had this kind of a representation. So, yeah. So, this is what I want.
So, having sat through this very patiently, and so on, I think one thing we should clarify, and that is again fall under the which is that it is become quite clear from many submissions that this delimitation exercise is not only a numerical or mathematical question. the social and the political concept in many manifest, myriad ways. We know, for example, that the current parliament does not represent, and this being done quite legally without doing it, a very large section of us. Just as it does not represent women, the women's representation is miserable, the representation of Muslims is miserable, and this is done legally. Okay, so we must be conscious of the fact, and I think I use my few minutes to try to emphasize this, that this is not a matter of a numerical equation or some kind of getting the statistics right alone. There is a rich history of opposition to the women's vote. There is now a growing opposition to other kinds of representation, and it's all being done in the name of law.
Instead of population, on the base of district wise. India totally 766. Okay. Then, those are members to represent of each, so that nearly 766 members will be accommodated. So this is my. On the basis that, so that the elected staff have a representative. Again, so now, for one example, like, I am from Kodagu district. Since 1952, we don't have opposition to represent from that district. Earlier, it was belongs to Bangalore and to the Lok Sabha. Now, it has belongs to my Lok Sabha. What we have to do is say, you cannot represent from our district. It's a distinct district which it has a guess. This is the, I think I have calculated up this. Now, I come to know that. I got the question. You heard of ಪ್ರತಿ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಗೂ ಒಬ್ಬ ಅಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಜನ ಮೆಣಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಅನುಭವ ಇದೆ. ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ರೂಮ್ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಪಾಠ ಮಾಡೋದು. ನಾನು 30 ಜನ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇದ್ದ 330 ಜನ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ರೂಮ್ ಸಾಕಾಗದೆ ಚರ್ಚ್ನಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಪಾಠ ಮಾಡಿ. I know the efficacy of our communication when we address the non-gathered speech. If you think it is humanly possible for a parliament to exist with 4,000 members, 888 members, have you thought about the sheer volume of the size of the gathering? We are making a joke by creating a parliament of 800 odd members. That is equally impossible for a parliament with 500 members. We are unable to regulate the proceedings. It's chaotic, okay, disorder. What are you saying? With 1,000 members, with 700 members, conceptually there is a problem. The problem is this: the power to create a district west within a state. Whereas the power to fix the number of members of the parliament rests with the parliament. By amending the constitution, 524 is not possible. So you want that to be changed by importing the consent of one member of parliament per district. You are giving the states to send a representative per district. In other words, state will become State will determine the number of members to go to parliament. That's it. That cannot be considered to be permissible. Therefore, reduce the traffic to the constitution. Sir, one last question. Very humble question. Don't be the ask that union is the question of the glory or not of the a large number of, new, rise of new political parties at the state level. They are some change for this. Sir, you, go here on this. Go here, because there's black and gold. It's a black and very athlete, he is going to. That is what. Who is on that? Who is on that? The black and very athlete, therefore. That is what it is. Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, thank the Ambedkar Center.
Now I am going to end this panel discussion session. Before that, I'm very glad to thank our expertise on the stage. I would like to thank all our expertise who have shared here their passion with us so far. We know you are all have great personalities, came here and expressed your thoughts with us. So once again, I thank all of you. Behalf of University of Mysore, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Extension and Research Center and Indian Polity Forum. And I would like to thank our audience who are gathered over here. And I would like to thank professors, directors, elders, senior citizens, and senior citizens of Mysore, students, research scholars. And finally, I would like to thank media persons who are here. And I would like to thank ICD, Bhaskar and Milan. Now we are in summing up session. I would like to call the Pramila to take over this session.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಸಮ್ಮಿಂಗ್ ಅಪ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಆದ್ರೆ 2 ದಿನಗಳಿಂದ ತಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿ ನಮ್ ಜೊತೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ವಿಚಾರ ಮಂಥನ ನಡೆದಿದೆ. ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದ್ ಮಾತು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಬಿಗಿನಿಂಗ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಶ್ಯೂರ್ ಡನ್ ಬೈ ಆರ್ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ. ಅಂಡ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಆಲ್ ಫಾರ್ ದಿಸ್ ಆಪರ್ಚುನಿಟಿ. ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಈ ಪದ ಅನೇಕ ಜನರ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ನನ್ನ ಸೇರಿದಂಗೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಆರಂಭ ಆದ ಈ ಜರ್ನಿ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಶ್ಯೂರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ. Thank you very much for being with us and spending all your time. Thank you.
Last year, September, this whole wide idea was started. The main aim of this meeting and conference is to awake the youngsters, and we were successful. Thank you all.